Anybody else coming in?
Ben might be coming in.
And Patrick?
Yeah, he should be here too.
Good afternoon.
I'm gonna put it back on mute till.
Senator Gaida,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bob Bailey, representing 27 Dallas District 2, President of the Senate Chamber.
Senator Reagan, Senator D'Alessandro,
President and the chamber, like, wonderful, maybe, Senator. It's great to be here. It's a very American day, sir.
thank you. Senator Hennessy,
Good afternoon, Aaron Hennessy from Littleton, I'm here in the Senate chamber.
Senator Morse,
Senator Morris,
I'm Senator Gary Daniels, and I am in the Senate chamber as well. Can you hear me now? Okay. We've switched technologies a little bit. Okay, you're recognized. You're recognized. If you could please suspend the. Okay, can you hear me now? That's getting feedback here. You can hear okay? All right, very good. Why don't you start your presentation over? Okay, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me better now?
Here we go.
Okay. I'm Sarah Stewart. I serve as the Commissioner of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and we're honored to be with you today to present our budget for the 2022-2023 biennium. This is just the second time DNCR has presented a budget, as it only became a department in July of 2017, when Governor Sununu took advantage of an opportunity to leverage connections by merging Parks and Recreation and Forests and Lands with the State Library, the Division of Historical Resources, and the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. These 5 divisions share a mission to protect, preserve, promote, and manage the state's natural and cultural resources, supporting New Hampshire's high quality of life and strengthening the experiences of our residents and guests. The current COVID-19 pandemic has only reinforced the public's engagement with the great outdoors, longing for community connections, and overall appreciation for cultural experiences. One illustration of this boom of support is our online donation button on the State Parks website. During the 2019 calendar year, Parks received about $20,500 from online donations. In the 2020 calendar year, Parks received over $84,000 in online donations. The budget approved by the House of Representatives includes $8.3 million in general funds for fiscal year 2022, out of our total budget of $56.4 million and $8.6 million in general funds for fiscal year 2023, out of a total budget of $57.6 million. Comprised mainly of federal and other agency income funds, our general fund amount comprises only 1/7 or 14% of our overall budget. Much of these general fund dollars are needed to qualify for the federal match we rely on in order to fulfill our statutory obligations. One way we've been able to reduce our general fund portion is by moving the Bureau of Historic Sites into the Parks and Recreation operating budget, which is operationally self-funded. We have also transitioned funding for several of our Design, Development, and Maintenance Bureau positions to now be 100% Parks funded, consistent with the service these positions provide in supporting the Parks Division and stewardship of our state lands. It's also important for us to make clear that we plan to return millions of dollars in program revenue through various grant appropriations, ranging from Bureau of Trails grant and aid to community trails and recreation maintenance, to outdoor recreation municipality grants, arts development and historical artifact grants, site preservation programs, and as well as the conservation plate fund programs that we're so proud of. The work accomplished within the New Hampshire Department of Natural and Cultural Resources clearly plays a vital role in maintaining the quality of life that we are so proud of. The work we do can also align with the goals set forth by our governor and our legislature, as we are positioned to bolster our economic future through a robust and responsible outdoor recreation economy and a creative economy that is being recognized as a priority in communities large and small. If I may turn your attention at this time to HB 2, as approved by the House, we have been fortunate enough to have the approval of $1,002,000 of investments into our state park system to include the following. Section 141.1, the sum of $655,000 for the purpose of redevelopment and improvement projects at the Jericho Mountain Beach Area Campground, including RV dump station, 2 new pit toilets, 10 new campsites, 4 new camping cabins, the extension of water utilities to the beach area campground, the extension of electrical utilities to the beach area campground, the winterization of 4 camping cabins, and 4 new trailer sites with water and electricity. Section 141.2 in the sum of $347,000 for the purpose of electrical upgrade projects at the Hampton RV Park, including a service upgrade from 400 amps to 1200 amps, new pedestals at 29 sites, new electrical conductors, excavation for utilities, and the installation of cable and internet conduits. Prior to consideration by the House, the governor's initial proposal for HB2 included what I just read, along with 3 other items as follows. The sum of $615,000 for the purpose of redevelopment and improvement projects at Fort Stark Historic Site, including security and safety improvements such as grate repair and fencing, entrance and parking lot improvements, 2 family bathrooms in a new building adjacent to the OMS building, extension of municipal water service to the toilet building, a new septic system for the toilet building, demolition of the harbor entrance control post building, and the cleaning and securing of bunker tunnels, rooms, and entryways. Also in the governor's HB2, the sum of $150,000 for the purpose of constructing new playgrounds at Wellington, Kingston, and White Lake State Parks. And finally, the sum of $250,000 for design, engineering, and preliminary site work for facility upgrades at the Ragged Neck picnic area at Rye Harbor State Park. We know that the governor would like to see these other initiatives, but particularly he would like to see the Fort Stark initiative return to HB2. And we appreciate your consideration of all of these. There are 4 additional budget requests that are included in your packet that we're happy to review with you. And we just thank you for this opportunity to present. I have a group of our agency's leadership with me, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, are there any questions from the committee? Senator D'Alessandro.
Just one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I look at the detailed change report, the numbers that you spoke of were reduced a bit. So there was an amendment to section 142 to fund project to the Jericho Mountain Beach area campground and the Hampton RV Park, and it eliminated 3 other projects and reduces the general fund appropriation by $1,015,000. How does that affect your ability to deliver?
You see where that is.
Yeah, he's talking about it.
Look at the detailed change
Yeah.
sheet.
So what's the effect of the removal of these items?
Well, I can certainly have Director Phil Bryce speak to the importance of these other items. We were thrilled to see them originally in HB2 that the governor put together, and we're operationally self-funded as the state park system, and these investments will allow us to generate more revenue where our popular spots are, but also to include safer experiences, particularly at Fort Stark. Phil, is there anything that you want to add about these 3 items?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senator D'Alessandro, Phil Bryce, Director of the Division of Parks and Recreation. Yes, if we're referring to the change being the reduction in the HB2 items, we have tens of millions of opportunities to invest in the park system. And so these are one of some of the higher priority projects that are both ours and the governor's, and we'd appreciate any consideration.
Further question?
Just further question. Does that mean that these aren't going to happen unless we reinstate them?
Senator, that is a very good question. We know that there's additional federal money coming forward, but we're not sure how that funding is going to be deployed. I would say over time, we would look to, I would say we would certainly be looking to make these improvements in our park system. So the issue isn't whether, pending, the ongoing support that the legislature has been giving us in the past years. The question is the timing. Will it occur in this biennium or the next biennium? Or the biennium after that? So that's where the funding of those additional items would provide additional guarantee that they're going to occur in the short term.
Further question?
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the collection of the parking fines at Hampton Beach, how are we? What's our receivable look like?
We've been doing very well. We had a lot of collection last year because of the number of violations of all the parking and COVID requirements. I didn't, I probably should have gotten you the exact numbers, but I certainly can provide that. But we are doing very well. We have new leadership of that. And we're really excited because we have new leadership of that team out there. And he is doing a great job. And so we really expect to see some improvement based on his leadership of the group. And also, of course, we continue to invest in technology. So I think we're doing very well. Our past, we more than recover the lost revenue if people had paid in our fines.
And the use of that overage money can be applied to projects?
Yes, it goes into the Hampton Meter Fund, which goes to pay the expenses of the staff, the meter staff, and it goes to pay some of the bonds for the seawall, and then the balance is transferred into the parks account to cover the cost, of course, of the lifeguards, the maintenance staff, and the other expenses of operating the Seacoast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. The first is the Fort Stark project the same project that was proposed in the last time we were doing the budget and not funded? My first question. And secondly, how accessible is Fort Stark to people with mobility issues?
Do you want to talk to that? Thank you for the question. We have our Fort Stark expert in the room, Ben Wilson, who is now the director of the Division of Historic Resources, and previously was the director of our historic sites, so knows the history of the projects there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. It's a great question. Yes, this is a similar project that as was proposed in the previous biennium. But more to your question about accessibility, Fort Stark is actually one of the more accessible military installation historic sites on the seacoast. And part of this project would help with some of that by increasing the number of the handicapped accessible parking, enlarging the parking lot, and working on the landscape to, again, encourage people with mobility issues to access that park.
Okay, any further questions? I do have one, and this again goes with Fort Stark. Just for clarification, you mentioned a two-family bathrooms in a new building adjacent to the OMS building. That new building, are we building a new building, or is that already built?
I can, Phil Bryce again, I can confirm, but I think it might be somewhat of an addition onto the current building. It won't be an entirely new building, but I will get back to you and confirm that. To the extent we can use the existing structure, we will, but sometimes old structures aren't conducive to putting new plumbing and stuff in, so it might be kind of a mix between the old building and a small addition onto the existing building, but I will confirm that.
Okay, yeah, if we could give verification of that, that would be helpful.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, you mentioned that you had 4 additional budget requests.
Yes, we would be happy to walk you through those. It's in your packet. I will ask Chris Marino to explain each of these.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Turning your attention to the 4 items that we've listed in the packet, starting with an amount to request for the Division of Historical Resources Office of Preservation. In this situation, we have we're fortunately in a position where we're receiving a federal grant forthcoming that is a little bit higher than what we've received in the past. We'd like to leverage that opportunity, but in doing so, it is necessary for us to increase our match ability. That is the general funds. So we are requesting additional general funds in the area of personnel support, both to help support the added scope of work as a result of the increased funds, but also to be able to maximize the use of the funds coming in. And that is identified as your first item. The second item is a situation similar, however, just being able to allocate some additional federal funds that are going to be coming in. We'd like to go ahead and just increase the budget projection at this time, since we know there is going to be an additional amount of money available in federal funds for state fire assistance. And then the last two items related to Connecticut Lake Headwaters, both stewardship endowment and the maintenance endowment. This is just a situation where we do have strong, a very healthy balance in these funds. And it has come to our attention, there is a need for some increased efforts in the stewardship needed at these locations. So we're seeking to go ahead and just adjust the budget that we submitted to increase in a couple of areas in order to be prepared to move forward with that this summer with the passage of the budget, should that proceed smoothly. Again, these are endowment funds. They're a very healthy state right now. No general funds are part of these requests. And that's essentially what we have on the table.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think we're all set. Have you got more, or is that it?
That's it. I hope we're nice and easy for you today.
That's a good start.
Good.
I'm sure if we have questions along the way, we can find your number.
Yeah, please reach out and we will do some follow-up with details that you asked for.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
And we have the Judicial Council. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Good afternoon.
For members of the committee, you'll be on page 660 of your compare report. And please continue with your presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Sarah Blodgett, Executive Director of the Judicial Council. The council's responsibilities have evolved quite a bit over the years, but overseeing the quality and the cost effectiveness of the indigent defense system continues to be our core mission. The council also provides for legal and guardian ad litem services in child protection cases, and it engages in public-private partnerships for civil legal aid. The council office is just 3 full-time employees, including myself, and it accounts for about 1% of our overall budget. Many of our expenditures are driven by uncontrollable and unpredictable factors, such as the number of child protection and criminal cases brought by the state each year. All of the programs that we work with, including the Public Defender, CASA, and New Hampshire Legal Assistance, have done an incredible job of providing crucial services during the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic. The state's funding for indigent defense fulfills the constitutional requirement to provide criminal representation to those who cannot afford it. Indigent defense now accounts for 85% of our budget, down from 89% in fiscal 14. Between 2014 and 2020, child protection costs have increased by more than 50%. And you can see this illustrated on the pie chart, which is on page 5 of our handout. We have seen a temporary decrease in both the criminal and the child protection cases since the start of the pandemic, but we anticipate that those numbers will go back up as the state begins to reopen. The assigned counsel line pays for representation of indigent defendants in criminal cases and accused parents in child protection cases. The parent representation constitutes a growing percentage of these overall costs. And in fiscal 20, it accounted for 80% of our overall expenditures. House Bill 1 maintains level funding for this accounting unit at $1.48 million in both fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. Based on recent trends, we believe that this appropriation will be adequate. However, this is one of our most unpredictable lines, and factors like the homicide rate have a significant impact on our costs. The council is working with DHHS to access some newly available federal funds for parent representation. It has been a lengthy process, but we're hopeful that we can draw down some of that funding in the near future. The guardian ad litem accounting unit includes representation in several types of court proceedings, such as guardianships and termination of parental rights. House Bill 1 maintains level funding for the probate accounting unit, but we are requesting an additional $241,950 for both fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. And our additional prioritized needs are highlighted on page 4 of our handouts. You can see the first significant increase in this accounting unit occurred in fiscal 18. And since that time, costs have exceeded $750,000 per year. I just requested an additional $200,000 for this accounting unit. And we expect that termination of parental rights cases will continue to increase. It has been more of a challenge for parents to obtain services during COVID, and mental health and substance use issues have been exacerbated during that time. Our contract attorney accounting unit, 1093, maintains level funding for the contract attorney program at $2,033,000 for each year of the biennium. As many of you know, the contract attorneys are the statutory backup to the public defender program, and they handle about 14% of the indigent defense caseload. They're assigned when the public defender has a conflict or is unable to take a case for another reason. These attorneys are reimbursed on a flat fee basis, and all of the contract attorneys are approved by the council's indigent defense subcommittee. This budget also maintains level funding for the public defender program at $23,751,832 for both fiscal 22 and 23. The public defender is the backbone of our indigent defense system, handling roughly 85% of the cases. Although we've seen a decrease in new cases during the pandemic, this is being offset by the amount of time that cases are remaining open. On today's date in 2020, the public defender had 9,031 open cases. Today, there are 11,173 open cases. That's an increase of over 1,800 cases. The council's contract with the public defender limits caseloads to 70 open and active cases per attorney. But today, many public defenders have over 100 cases. Issues that the public defender clients suffer from, like substance use and mental health struggles, have been exacerbated throughout the pandemic. We also anticipate an increase in the number of people who qualify for a public defender in the months to come. This budget maintains level funding for services other than counsel. We are requesting an additional prioritized need of $483,129 in fiscal 22 and $467,996 in fiscal 23. The Judicial Council will only pay for a service if a judge has determined that it is necessary for an adequate defense. And these types of services include transcriptionists, interpreters, and experts. Expenditures over the last 4 years have exceeded $1.2 million. with a peak in fiscal 19 of almost $1.88 million. I just requested an additional $500,000 for this accounting unit. Moving along to accounting unit 1098, New Hampshire Legal Assistance. The council serves as the pass-through for the state's commitment to the civil legal needs of indigent residents through its appropriation to New Hampshire Legal Assistance. While the public defender program represents individuals facing criminal charges, NHLA represents individuals facing civil legal challenges, such as unlawful convictions, foreclosures, or domestic abuse. This budget maintains level funding for NHLA at $1.5 million. Due in part to the increase in state funding in this biennium, NHLA has at least 3 advocates stationed in all 5 of its offices, including the North Country office in Berlin. NHLA is on the front lines of cases that have been and will continue to be impacted by the pandemic, including housing relief, employment security, and protection from domestic violence matters, all areas that the state has prioritized through its COVID relief initiatives. The pandemic has underscored the importance of assisting people with these basic needs. NHLA's response to the pandemic has been both nimble and effective. They created the Crisis Response Fellowship, a public-private partnership that maximized CARES Act funding to assist clients with housing and unemployment issues. Remote hearings and client meetings, when sufficient, have allowed assignment based on advocate availability, not geographic location. NHLA has also been able to create and deliver live educational webinars on topics such as eviction. And it has allowed NHLA to reach out to people around the state with this critical information. Civil legal services are a crucial component of many of the most important challenges faced by our state. Keeping people in their homes, making sure they maintain their income, making sure their utilities stay on. These are essential services to meet the needs of veterans, the needs of people facing mental health crises, and the needs of people with substance use disorders. They are also essential to the state's ongoing management of the pandemic. House Bill 1 also maintains level funding for CASA at $926,550 for each year of the biennium. As many of you know, CASA is the gold standard for guardian ad litem services in child protection cases. Their volunteer advocates receive extensive training and supervision. They are required to meet with these kids every month, and that level of attention and dedication is just not possible with the private guardian ad litem program. In fiscal 20, CASA advocates spent over 77,000 hours and drove over 500,000 miles on their cases. That time commitment alone would have cost the state over $4.5 million. The pandemic has been one of the biggest challenges that CASA has ever faced. Because of the urgent nature of these cases, courts have prioritized them throughout the pandemic. When in-person visits were not possible, CASA pivoted to require eyes on a child so that their advocates could FaceTime or Zoom, but they were committed to making sure that children were safe during this unprecedented period of isolation. In fact, CASA's actually had more contact with children in the first half of this fiscal year compared to the first half of the last fiscal year. CASA also continued to aggressively train and recruit volunteers. They conduct online information sessions twice a month, and they have moved to an online training program for new advocates. CASA intends to continue with many of these changes to make their services more available and to continue more advocates throughout the state interested and engaged in providing this service. Our final accounting unit, 1101, pays for the private guardians ad litem in the child protection cases. This budget maintains level funding at $150,000 each year, but we are requesting an additional prioritized need of $150,000 in addition to that for each year of the biennium. The private guardians ad litem are assigned when CASA is unavailable. They are paid $60 an hour with caps imposed by the court. Expenditures are down from this time last year, but I am anticipating an increase in child protection cases, which will impact these costs in the next biennium. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many times have you had to come to fiscal looking for additional appropriation this last fiscal year?
This fiscal year, I only went to fiscal once, which was very unusual.
And what, further question? Thank you. And what was the amount that you asked for?
I requested a total of $730,000. $500,000 was for services other than counsel. $200,000 was for the probate guardian ad litem line. And then I requested an additional, I believe it was 30, let me double check. $30,000 for the private guardians ad litem.
So,
Follow up?
okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in total, it was 750,000 that you requested?
It was, I'm sorry, 730,000.
730. Further question?
Further question?
And in your presentation, you had two asks. One was an additional 800,000, and then another, I have another 300,000. Is that correct? In abuse and neglect, you asked for an additional 150 each year?
That's
And-
right. In abuse and neglect, the private guardians ad litem, I requested an additional $150,000 for each year of the biennium.
Right.
For the services other than counsel, the request was slightly different for each year. $483,129 for fiscal 22 and $467,996 for fiscal 23. And then for the probate guardian ad litem line, accounting unit 1092, I requested an additional $241,950 for each year of the biennium.
So I didn't get all of those figures, for the point, Mr. Chairman. I didn't get all of those numbers down, but in aggregate, what's the ask?
The aggregate, it is actually on page 4 of our handout. For fiscal 22, it's a total, an additional $875,079. And in fiscal 23, an additional $859,916.
And those figures are all on page 4 of the Judicial Council handout.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question.
Further questions? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sarah. I'm looking at the significant reductions in the House version compared to prior years' appropriations. And it begs the question for me, is there another or different source of funding? Are we expecting increased federal funds to offset, those? There has to be some rationale behind that.
So the amount of our initial appropriation has not changed that dramatically, but when you compare it with our actual expenditures, you'll see a significant difference. The Judicial Council has historically only relied on general funds for all of our appropriations, but there has been a change at the federal level recently that allows us to get some funding to cover the costs for parent representation. We are hoping that we will get approximately $150,000 federal dollars to put toward that expense. Although the feds have been very outspoken that this is not meant to supplement the state appropriation, but to enhance the quality of the parent representation.
Further questions?
Thank you.
I do have one. Of the services that you offer, how do you measure whether you're successful in those services or not?
So we typically rely on feedback from different stakeholders. For the public defender program, we regularly get feedback from the judicial branch. We got some federal funding in the past year and a half to get the services of the Sixth Amendment Center, which is a nonprofit based out of Boston that does assessments of indigent defense programs across the state. And they hopefully will be able to conclude their assessment in the next couple of months and provide us with a report. With regard to CASA, we get feedback from the court, generally not case-specific feedback because these cases are confidential, but judges have approached us numerous times with positive feedback about CASA. If there is a concern about the representation that's being provided by a particular attorney in a criminal defense case, I can get a complaint directly from the defendant. Judges will reach out to us with concerns about a particular attorney, and then I bring those complaints. If it is about a contract attorney, I bring those to the Indigent Defense Subcommittee. But we do hear back from a variety of folks in the criminal justice system.
Okay, by virtue of the fact that you need to ask for additional funds here, and you also testified that you have increasing caseloads, what is that indicative of something in the process not working, probably before it gets to you?
That is a great question, Mr. Chair. I think what we have seen in the past 12 months have been so unusual, it's hard to really draw any lessons that I think will outlive the pandemic. But we've certainly seen an increase in the number of felony cases that are going through the system. And I think over the past 12 months, because of the repercussions of, the multiple impacts we've seen from the pandemic, criminal cases are not moving as quickly. There are now many jury trials being scheduled, but there is a bit of a backlog at the judicial branch. So we anticipate that cases will resolve and that we will get to more of a level of stasis with the incoming and the closed cases at the public defender. But I think that, in talking with stakeholders in the child protection arena, there is a belief that the impact of the pandemic will continue to be felt in the number of abuse and neglect cases that we see over the next few years. The economic uncertainty and the isolation that some of the more vulnerable people in our state are experiencing will likely lead to an increase in those cases.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah, can you delineate any percentage of cases that might be sexual abuse of minors or internet crimes against children, of any categorization of those? And if so, can you talk to the incidence of those, rising, declining, staying the same?
Thank you so much for the question. I don't have that information, but I can certainly get that information and provide it to you. I have heard concerns that with young children being home and having remote schooling, that the opportunity for victimization of internet crimes has increased. And we haven't tracked that through the criminal process, but it likely has impacted both criminal cases and child protection cases. I think the real question is, when will we actually see the impact of that in our case numbers? So let me look into that and see what information we have available now, and I will get that to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time and your presentation, Sarah.
Thank you all so much.
And now we will hear from the Treasury Department. This will be on page 178. She is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have our state treasurer with us. Good afternoon, Monica.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mazzapelli.
And I think we're all set. There is a handout that has been given to us, so you're recognized for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would like to begin with a brief overview of the Treasurer's budget. Core Treasury operations, we have 23 positions, and core Treasury operations, including the band appropriate program, represent approximately 2% of the total budget. The rest of our budget really includes items that are pretty much out of our control, but they are housed in our budget. So I will start with debt service expenditures. Those represent approximately 50% of Treasurer's budget. Then we also have aid to municipalities, the LCHIP program, and a grant to the CDFA, which represent approximately 39% of our budget. And we also house the scholarships, 3 scholarship programs that are overseen by the College Tuition Savings Plan Advisory Commission. Those scholarships also are housed in our budget, and they represent approximately 9% of the total budgeted dollars. So I would like to move on to the, highlight some of the notable differences between the actual expenditures in fiscal year 20 and the adjusted authorized in fiscal year 21, and also compare that to the proposed budget. So just a few items to highlight. Debt service for the community college system of New Hampshire in fiscal year 20 were lower than the original projections, and that was primarily due to they had less capital appropriations that in the past they had, and in that fiscal year, in that biennium, they did not materialize. The other item I'd like to highlight is the general fund distributions to municipalities. And just so I can put a page here, is that one is on page 184. The difference here is in the prior biennium, there was an additional 40 million appropriated to municipalities, and that's the difference. So the appropriation was included in fiscal year 20, and we paid 20 million to municipalities in addition to the meals and rooms distribution. And then in fiscal year 21, it's just showing the amount budgeted for that year, the 68.8 million. So that's the 20 million difference that you see in the handout that I distributed. Another item to highlight is the difference in the amounts relative to the abandoned property program. That difference really is that we end up paying less for abandoned property holder audits, and that's because we are not really sure how much property we're going to receive from those audits. And we typically pay them on a retainer basis. So we pay them based on the property they pay us. So for every dollar that we pay, we receive $8. And the last item I would like to highlight in this notable differences is the amounts in the Governor's Scholarship Program. This program awards 4-year grants to first-year full-time Pell eligible students, and that's over the course of 4 years. So the expenditures that you see in fiscal year 20 represent the actual amount that those schools were reimbursed, not necessarily how much all the schools are going to receive. So that's paid over the course of 4 years, and that's why you see a smaller amount compared to what has been budgeted. And so those were the just items that I wanted to highlight differences between actual expenditures and the fiscal year 21 adjusted authorized. I would like to move on to the items including House Bill 2 and in a few, I guess, technical, issues, I'm going to call them. So in House Bill 2, as amended by the House, so I guess I'll back up for a moment. The governor's budget created a separate accounting unit to account for the new debt service for the proposed unified university system in New Hampshire. And based on the current version of the budget, that proposal was not included in the House budget, but we did create an accounting unit in our budget to account for that new debt service. And so based on the, so if the Senate were to concur with the House, we will respectfully request that that funding and the new accounting unit is moved back to the old accounting unit relative to the university system of New Hampshire. And so that new accounting unit is on page 181. I'm sorry. Yeah, I believe this is 181.
I believe that's what we have on our sheet.
I'm sorry, so page 182 and the old accounting unit is on page 181. Then the next item I would like to highlight is the some of the changes in the unique scholarship programs and the Governor's Scholarship Fund. The House removed the funding for the Governor's Scholarship Program in our budget, and the House also amended the Governor's proposal to allocate 60% of the 529 plan assessments that we collect, and they currently fund the unique scholarship programs. With that change in the budget, the House also added an amendment that is granting the authority to the Advisory Commission to transfer funds between the two funds that they oversee, the New Hampshire Excellence in Higher Education Trust Fund and the Governor's Scholarship Fund. So with that change, it would appear that the Advisory Commission will have the authority to fund the Governor's Scholarship Program. And if that were the case, and if the Senate concur with the House, then we'll respectfully request that in order to keep those expenditure accounts alive, perhaps $1 could be added to those budget lines, so we could fund this program as originally intended. The last item that I wanted to cover today is, well, in House Bill 2, Section 41, the House is also suspending the state revenue sharing with citizen towns for the biennium, and that would have been $25.2 million. And that has been suspended for the last several years. And that is all I wanted to cover today, Mr. Chairman. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little confused on page 184 on the municipal aid line. Didn't we appropriate $20 million for each of the 2 fiscal years? Why does class 256 show 0 for the fiscal year 21 adjusted authorized?
Thank you for the question, Senator. You are correct. So the appropriation was included in fiscal year 20. And what happened is the entire 40 million were appropriated in fiscal year 20. So in fiscal year 21, the amount was brought forward, and that is what's spent for the fiscal year 21 activity. So there wasn't two different appropriations, the entire amount. And I'm not sure if that was, how the decision was made, but the 40 million was put in fiscal year 20, and then the amount was brought forward in fiscal year 21.
Follow up?
Thank you. So why does fiscal year 20 show only 20 million instead of 40 million?
So these are the actual expenditures that you're seeing in fiscal year 20 compared to, and then fiscal year 21 is actually the budgeted amount. That's why you're seeing 0 in fiscal year 21. And in fiscal year 20 is the actual expenditures, not the amount budgeted.
But we appropriated.
So there's
It was-
$20 million floating around somewhere that's not.
It was appropriated, so it was just mechanically is just it was brought forward. The authority was brought forward, and that's what we were able to pay. For you're correct, 40 million were appropriated for that biennium, but everything was put in fiscal year 20.
Wow, thank you.
Further questions, Senator D'Alessandro?
Yeah, Monica, thank you. But further question on that, 40 million was appropriated. Did the communities get the second 20 million?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Okay, so the 40 million was distributed based on the municipal aid.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Treasurer, I'm looking on page 181. I see the debt service for the UNH University System in New Hampshire. Can you approximate the total debt for the university system?
I do not have the total debt, but I can certainly get that for you. Yes, I have several years. I have the schedule, but I don't believe that's all that I'm looking at. But I can certainly get the outstanding amount for you for the university system of New Hampshire. Yes.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's two things I'd like to see. I'd like to see the tuition rates in-state and out-of-state for the last 5 years. I'd also like to see the debt load for the last 5 years. The total debt for the university system. And it don't have to be right now, but at some point here while we're deliberating. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we have a lot of cash that we distribute out in short-term lending. And my question is, has the Treasury Department given any consideration to taking a part of that amount and investing it with state chartered financial institutions?
Thank you for the question. So what I can share with you is, and this was an initiative of the governor this year, but last year in the beginning of the pandemic, we started a program, a community bank program. And so what we did, and the idea was to start investing in those New Hampshire charter banks. And so we did, and what we did is we opened CDs with all of the banks that wanted to participate. And so that was I guess one way to transition into that program. And those CDs are actually maturing within the next few weeks, because we've been doing that for 12 months. And we intend to renew those CDs with the same banks, and we're going to offer the same opportunity to all of the banks that want to participate. So we're assuming that these banks are using those funds to also lend to the community, but at least we found that this is a way that we could do it. And last year, when the pandemic hit, it was difficult to predict our liquidity needs, but fortunately we were able to, and we put aside 50 million. So that's how much we're investing in those banks. And so right now, we're gonna renew that commitment and we're gonna invest those 50 million.
50,
50 million, yes.
15. Thank you.
Further questions, Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Monica, with regard to abandoned property, when do we escheat the abandoned property? When do we do that?
So I still have estimates right now is in fiscal year. Are you asking me for, are you asking for 21?
Yes.
I'm gonna need a second. I have the estimates for 22 and 23.
Yeah, you've got 2.8 for 22 and 2.9 for 23. I just wonder what it's going to be for 21.
So okay. And I know you have the estimates. Thank you. So we are still working on liquidating the securities that gives us the true amount. And I should have that within the next few weeks because we are the custodian is currently selling those securities. So I actually asked for that figure, but it's not available yet. But I should be able to give it to you within the next week or so. If you know, I will definitely ask again to see how that figure is. But I believe we're going to be close to the estimate that we have for fiscal year 21.
Okay, the estimate's 2.8.
No, that seems very low. I just need to find my number. I'll get back to you. It should be around 15 million.
Wow. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Monica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Monica.
day.
Thanks, everyone.
And our next presentation was with the banking department. I see that Commissioner Little is on. And I think we've got everyone. Good. Yes. And this will be on page 367. And you do have a handout for this one as well. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
Doing well.
Very nice to see you.
I think we're all set, so you could start your presentation anytime.
Very good. Hopefully you have a copy of our handout. I am, for the record, Jerry Little. I am your State Bank Commissioner. This is the department's budget presentation for the next 2 fiscal years. The banking department is a fairly simple and straightforward department. We are organized into 2 accounting units for the purposes of finances and the state budget. One of the units is accounting unit 2046. That's the part of our operation that regulates and examines state chartered banks, credit unions, and trust companies. You have in your document, you'll see the number count of each of those types of institutions. And then 2043, which we know of commonly in the banking department, is CCD, the Consumer Credit Division, oversees several thousand licensed entities. Think of them mortgage companies, licensed lenders, and the such. So the functional difference between 2046 and 2043 is that the entities in 2046 are chartered entities, a heavier load of regulation that we apply to them. And 2043 are licensed entities with a lighter load of regulation. The banking department has 54 authorized positions, but 11 of them are not currently filled. As you can see from the handout, 5 are funded but open, and 6 are unfunded positions. We're not seeking any new positions in the 22 to 23 budget that's before you, although we may reclassify and or consolidate some of those 5 currently funded but open positions to refocus them in response to an ongoing growth in the number of non-depository trust companies that we deal with at the New Hampshire Banking Department. An important point to always keep in mind relative to the banking department is that we are entirely self-funded. The banking department does not use any general funds, doesn't use any federal funds. 100% of the monies that we spend to operate this agency are raised by the agency. We leave behind a fee for conducting examinations with everybody that we visit. So there is no general fund money that goes into it. We're basically a self-funded agency. The budget figures that you see for the fiscal year authorized, we're at $6,646,000. The point of this budget is that it's a maintenance budget. The governor and the House both accepted our recommended budget of $6,424,000 for the 22 fiscal year and $606,742,000 for the 23 fiscal year. There's not been an awful lot of discussion or controversy relative to the budget that we presented, primarily, I think, because it's flat funded and a maintenance of effort budget. Chairman Daniels, you asked us to take a look at, provide you figures for our 2020 actual budget and the 21 adjusted authorized that we're functioning under right now, and then to compare them to the 22 and 23 budgets that we're proposing. You can see a chart on the second page of the handout. I hope the numbers are big enough so that you can read them. But we've tried to present to you all of those figures you've asked for, the 2020 actual, the 2021 authorized, and then the proposals for 22 and 23 with dollar and percentage differences between each of the fiscal years. You can see from that the 22 House approved and governor approved proposed budget is $222,000 less than the current 21 actual, the 21 authorized that we are working in. And the 23 number is just $95,000 more than what we're working with today. So it really truly is a flat budget from this year right on through for the next 2 years. We've been able to do this because we've accomplished some very significant management tools here at the banking department. Probably the most important of which is the implementation of a career ladder. I'm not sure what it's like at other agencies, but here at the banking department, historically, we had to set aside an amount that was roughly about $1 million to hold positions funded and open for the ability to promote our examiner staff and other employees when time came for them to move from grade 2 to grade 3 or grade 3 to grade 4, which is our highest level of examination staff. If we didn't have a funded open position to move them into, they couldn't progress. And when they couldn't progress, they didn't stay here. We have keen competition from our federal counterparts at the FDIC and the NCUA for talented bank and credit union and trust company examination staff. It costs us, by functional cost analysis, between $125,000 and $150,000 to bring an examiner from the trainee stage up to examiner 3 level, where they're able to work on their own, assigned to do an examination. That's a heavy load. And what we were finding 5 years ago was that we were training for the FDIC and the NCUA, and it was a revolving door. So working with the Department of Administrative Services, Office of Personnel, we've implemented a career ladder so that those steps are taken into account when we get our salary and benefits lines from DAS. Every time a new budget cycle comes around, it includes the anticipated promotion of those examiners. And those promotions are based upon solid metrics that require them to have hit certain performance marks and training levels. And again, it's been approved by DAS and is implemented now. So it does a couple of things. One, when DAS gives us our salary and benefits lines, all of those figures are included in it, and included in assuming that our examiners are going to continue to advance their careers here at the banking department. But two, it allows us to step beyond the practice that we used to have where we were holding jobs funded and opened so that we could promote people without losing them when a new job comes along. So that's been a big gain for us and has made a big difference and has helped us really give you a budget that written with a much sharper pencil, and it's much more reflective of what we expect to see happening employee and staff wise in the next 2 years. And focusing on the employee staffing is an important point as well. But 82% of all of the costs that we have at the banking department, if you look through it, you'll see it's mainly salaries, benefits, training, about 82%. We don't have vehicles. We don't have a single vehicle. We don't have tool systems or weapons systems or any of the other expensive stuff, no lab equipment. We have laptops, scanners, printers. That's about it. And people are our most important resource. So that's why with a career ladder, with a system of more cautious and technology-driven exam scoping, we have been able to really provide to you a very tight budget this time around. We don't have any significant issues to report to you. It is a flat maintenance of effort budget. We are seeing significant growth in our trust department side. And so we're moving people internally at this point in time to adapt to that increase in activity over there. Just a warning or a caution, we're probably not going to be able to just sort of move the people around for much longer. I would suspect that 2 years from now, when we're discussing the 2024 and 2025 budget, we're going to have some new positions in there. If the level of growth in non-depository trust company activity continues at the current pace. That's it in House Bill 1 for us. We do have a section in House Bill 2, which is section 285, and allows for recovery of department expenses for managing the public deposit investment pool. Back in the early 1990s, when we were having a lot of bank failures in the state, decision was made to create the public deposit investment pool. New Hampshire is not the only state to run a public deposit investment pool, but it is the only state to house its public deposit investment pool in the banking department. If there's a state agency involved, it's generally within the state treasury. Not all states even use that. Some have organizations that are set up by the folks that use the public deposit investment pool, primarily cities and towns, school districts, counties, and those sorts of municipal type of organizations. Many of them have set up nonprofit subsidiaries that they operate to manage the public deposit investment pool. The conflict that's created by putting it in the banking department is that for 98% of my time at the banking department, my mission is to make sure that we have healthy banks that are providing products and services at fair rates to consumers and businesses across the state of New Hampshire. And then 2% of the time, I take that hat off and I slide into the chair of the manager of the public deposit investment pool, and I try to see how much money, how strong can I compete with those banks that I regulate? How much of the depositor funds that are to the credit of those cities, towns, school districts, and counties can I siphon out of the state community banks and into the public deposit investment pool? Right now, liquidity isn't a major issue for our depository institutions because of primarily the pandemic. People are, frankly, a lot of folks are flush with cash and they're saving it. at a higher rate than normally. So liquidity at community banks is not currently a major problem, but it almost always is. And so while 98% of my time is trying to figure out, are my banks liquid? Are they being operated safely? As I say, that 2% of the time when I'm managing the public deposit investment pool, I'm trying to see how much money I can take out of the state's community banks. And that's a really, really difficult contradiction in missions that I have been struggling with. So I've been talking with the public deposit investment pool, the municipal association, the school boards association, all of the entities that are represented on the board about moving the PDIP to some other entity, but I'm not gaining any traction. And so one thing that we have decided to do is that it would be fair, the banking department, to recover the expenses at a minimum that it expends on managing the PDIP. If I don't recover it from the PDIP, then I'm charging that through our assessment fee to those very same community banks and credit unions that we're taking the money away from. So it's a little bit odd for them to support and subsidize the PDIP since we're competing against them. So there's language, and you can see it at the bottom of the second page of our handout, that authorizes the commissioner to recover the exact expenses, nothing extra, just the exact expenses of managing the public deposit investment pool. And that is my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'd be glad to take any questions. Also on the line with me, our Deputy Commissioner, Amelia Galdieri, and our Business Administrator, Mike Jesianowski. And so if there's a question I can't answer, I'm sure they can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask you the same question I asked the treasurer. Have you considered taking any part of the PDIP and specifically saying we're going to invest it in locally chartered financial institutions?
We have, thank you for the question, Senator. It was about a year and a half ago that I pushed the issue significantly at the public deposit investment pool, which is managed for us by a company out of Philadelphia by the name, it's known as PFM. They're doing a fantastic job. I wouldn't ever change anything about PFM. I think they're excellent. They made a very concerted effort to try to interest local community banks in accepting some of the PDIP's funds in certificates of deposit, and they didn't get any takers. One of the problems is that PFM is able to literally take that money and invest it around the world. And it's impossible for our small community banks to compete rate-wise with those other investors or those other recipients of investable funds on a global nature. The public deposit investment pool monies, which are tax revenues collected by primarily municipalities or school districts or counties around the state of New Hampshire, leaves the state, which is another reason why it's difficult for me running the pool to see all of that money leaving New Hampshire. It's been averaging about $250 million per month. It's down a little bit now during the pandemic. We're down to, I just checked the numbers about an hour ago, it's down to around $236 million on a monthly basis that is taken out of our local governmental units and invested primarily around the country, but also around the globe. It's an international market, and they're able to provide rates of return that are much higher than any of our community banks could afford to offer. So we have tried, Senator, but it's not something that's feasible.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for taking my question. I thought I heard you say that you have five funded but open positions, and that you use potentially those funds to incentivize retention. Is that correct?
No, I'm sorry, Senator. Thank you for the question. We have 5 funded but open positions that we are in the process of looking at to reclassify them and refocus them to address the increasing workload we have on the trust side, because we're getting so many new charters for non-depository trust companies in the state of New Hampshire. We've got 3 pending right now, and we've just approved a couple new ones. The question about retention had to do, or the statement about retention had to do with the career ladder that we were able to implement recently. And that we were not able to guarantee somebody that signed on with us as a bank examiner trainee that once they got through their first 2 years in their initial training, that we would have a position for them as a bank examiner 3. So what we were doing was keeping, to be able to say to them, we've got a job. We would keep a funded position open so that when somebody came along through our training section of a couple of years, there would be that position open. But we couldn't keep enough open to satisfy everybody because we had this revolving door where they were coming in, we were training them, or they were going to the FDIC and around and around and around. And so to end that cycle, we created a career ladder, which says that here is the training regimen that you will go through. You're going to have to accomplish these 6 schools and receive an acceptable rate of credit at those schools. You're going to have run an exam as a trainee lead. You're going to have experienced what it is to do an exam in all of our divisions, banking, trust, and consumer credit, and on and on. So once we proved to the Office of Personnel that we had a very well thought out, provable system for providing training, they were willing to accept the idea that we would create a career ladder where if an examiner comes in as a trainee and they hit all of the schools that we want them to go to and get an excellent score, and they do the cross training that we require them to do and do it well and get good ratings from the division directors, they then can, after the certain correct amount of time, proceed to a bank examiner 3. So we didn't need to wait for a funded but open position to come along. We have a position open and waiting for them. One of the things we were fighting against was that the new trainees that came in, because they were coming in regularly as the FDIC was stealing our staff once we trained them, was that they would look around and see, well, there's 4 BE4s and 3 bank examiner 3s ahead of me. Unless one of them retires, dies, or goes and works someplace else, it's not going to create an opening and my career won't advance. So we were basically the training camp for the FDIC and the NCUA. We were spending a lot of state money to get those people trained. We weren't getting the benefit of that training, and now we've pretty much stopped that. We now have the career ladder in place. When the budget cycle starts, DAS provides us with our salary and benefit figures. They fill in that blank for us, and they fill in the blank based upon the career ladder. They know who's here working for us and what status they're at and what they're going to be at following one more year. And so it has made our budgeting much sharper, much more accurate, but it also stops that problem of having our training up examiners and having them go work for the feds. Did I answer that question, Senator?
It does. Thank you very much. Follow up. You have 6 unfunded positions. And am I safe to presume that those are for the expansion and non-depository trust burden that you see forthcoming?
They're not earmarked at this point in time for that, but it is most likely, given the trends that we're seeing, that will be the case. We don't see an awful lot of activity or likelihood of de novoing, fancy word for starting up new banks. We have had a couple in New Hampshire, unlike most of the rest of the country. We have had a couple of new banks start in the last 5 years in New Hampshire. And we're actually talking with somebody who wants to start another one in New Hampshire. But by and large, the population of depository institutions, banks, and credit unions is pretty static at this point in time. Meanwhile, on the trust side of the operation, we have phenomenal growth, and the same thing is going on in consumer credit with licensees these days. I'm sure you're aware that it's a pretty hot housing market out there at this point in time. And when that happens, every time that happens, we get a pretty big flush of new mortgage loan originators that want to come into the business. So they're likely, given on current experience, when we need those positions, which as I've noted is probably going to be 24, 25, they're more likely going to go to the side of the house that manages, regulates, charters, non-depository trust companies than depository institutions, or to the Consumer Credit Division for the management of responsibilities relative to licensees.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Is this growth in the non-depository trusts related to the legislation we passed a few years back?
Yes, it is, sir. Yes, thank you for the question. It actually started probably in 2010, I think, was the first piece of legislation brought forward by the New Hampshire Trust Council. Yes, we've been working for over a decade now to make New Hampshire an attractive site for locating and operating non-depository trust companies and family trust companies.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Commissioner.
My pleasure. It's nice to see you, Senator.
Have a great day. At this time, the committee will be in recess until 2:45. Okay, if the committee will please come back to order. We will welcome those from the retirement system with us today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Would you like me to begin my presentation now?
Yes, if you could, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Jan Goodwin, and I am the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Retirement System. Here with me today is Gerard Murphy, our Director of Finance. Also with me is Tim Crutchfield, our Deputy Director, Larry Johansson, our Director of Investments, and Marty Carlin, our Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs. For those of you.
Gerard Murphy, is that the Gerard Murphy? Formerly of the Legislative Budget Office, the man who sunk the ship that traveled across the harbor?
I would recognize that voice anywhere, Senator.
Please continue, Jan.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes. For those of you who may not be aware, this will be my first retirement system budget presentation as I took over as Executive Director on the 1st of this month. Our mission is to provide secure retirement benefits and superior service. While the messenger has changed, our message is consistent with prior years. While we still have some challenges in front of us, we are pleased with the positive progress we have made and the significant operational improvements that have been implemented. NHRS has over 48,000 members and 39,000 retirees and beneficiaries. It is managed by 13 trustees, and investment oversight is provided by an independent investment committee consisting of 6 members. As fiduciaries, they are obligated to act solely in the interests of the system's members and beneficiaries. With the exception of the state treasurer, who serves ex officio, the trustees and investment committee members are appointed through the governor and council. Consistent with our prior presentations, we have 2 handouts: an overview with highlights, initiatives, and strategic challenges, a slide presenting an overview of the retirement system that we prepared earlier this year for the House committee presentations, with some updates to the data through 12/31/20. Because of the time limitations for this presentation, we do not plan to go through these slides, but we believe they provide information that you may find useful for future reference. The statutory administrative budget encompasses all internal, non-investment related administration costs, including projected IT costs at full value. Pursuant to statute, the Retirement Systems Board of Trustees reviews and approves the statutory administrative budget biennially.
Jan, could you suspend one moment, please?
Yes, sir.
We don't have the presentation.
Yeah,
We don't have the presentation that you are talking about.
I just have,
Okay.
so I'll have to get it to you, or I can go make copies right now. Go ahead.
What, did you want to do that now? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to be in recess for about 5 minutes while copies are made of the presentation. Thank you. What's that?
Where's Gerard?
Senator, I'm here. I'm here.
Gerard, are you liking your new residence?
I'm loving it. Things are going very well. So I'm very happy.
Well, you know, Gerard, we've been missing you around the State House. Your presence is commanded here.
Your aim will get better. I'm sure of it, Senator. I know it will.
My aim will get better. Listen, I've been Give me a number where I can call you.
Sure, sure. 603-410-3656.
3656.
Yep.
Okay. I'll drop a dime on you.
I look forward to it, Senator. I look forward to it.
Oh, you look very distinguished now, Gerard. Yeah.
I'm trying. It's hard to keep up with these folks up here. They all look so nice. So I'm trying. I'm doing my best to keep up.
You're the new Jackie Dianis.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. Those are some gigantic shoes to fill.
Well, you can do it.
I hope so. I'll keep trying.
How's the steamship? That's what I want to know. Is it safe to ride on that steamship?
I hope so. I hope so. I left them in wonderful shape. Let me tell you. Let me tell you.
I'm happy. I'm happy.
I'm going to go down and see them next week. I'm going to go see the family next week. So
Oh, good.
I'll give you the full report.
All right. A full appraisal.
Yep.
Oh, Gerard. Oh, wow. I can see him.
Jan, would you be able to share, as you're going through the presentation, would you be able to share those screens?
Sir, I do not have access to that. Marty, could you please help out with that?
Yeah, I have them open, so I'll share. Well, it's the slideshow we weren't going to go through, so that's just an attachment, but we can make sure you have it. But the overview document I'll share right now.
Okay. There's-
Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Yeah, but we can't read it.
I can pump it up a little. I don't know if it disappears on your screen or if that's helpful.
That always helpful.
We're going to scream about a 1% return. I bet it can scream. So, Mrs. Hennessy, what's going on up north in Little Town? Oh, nice. You have two, right? How old are they? So you got one in high school. Well, that's about the same age as Christina's, my daughter's kids. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Oh. Now, of the brothers, there were like 7 brothers and 2 sisters, right, in the Hennessy family? 6 and 2. And how many are still alive?
Okay, I think we're all set to continue.
Thank you. Pursuant to statute, the Retirement Systems Board of Trustees reviews and approves the statutory administrative budget biennially. Our statutory administrative operating budget for fiscal year 21 is $12.29 million, and our proposed budgets for the next 2 years are virtually flat at $12.31 million in FY22 and $12.16 million in FY23, based on fully staffing all 71 authorized positions. As you all well know, the New Hampshire Retirement System is not an executive branch agency, but is a statutorily created pension trust. Although its expenses flow through the state, those costs are reimbursed from the retirement trust, which is in turn funded by contributions from employers and members and investment returns. The budget that is before you today has been fully vetted and adopted by our Board of Trustees. Before I go into greater detail on the operations of the retirement system, I would like to share these key facts about NHRS. NHRS provides a modest pension benefit. The average annual pension is just over $20,800. Approximately 2/3 of our 39,000 pension recipients receive less than $25,000 per year. NHRS benefits are funded by member contributions, employer contributions, and investment returns. NHRS investments have achieved an average annual return of 7.5% over the last 25 years. NHRS benefits help support the New Hampshire economy. In the last fiscal year, NHRS paid out more than $816 million in pensions and $46 million in medical subsidy benefits. Just under 80% of NHRS retirees live in New Hampshire, and they spend their money right here. According to the Pensionomics 2021 report by the National Institute on Retirement Security, these benefits support 8,495 jobs in New Hampshire. There is a plan in place to pay down the NHRS unfunded liability. As everyone knows, NHRS has a significant unfunded actuarial accrued liability, the UAL. As of June 30, 2020, the UAL was $6 billion. There are 18 years remaining on the original 30-year amortization period for the unfunded liability enacted in 2007. Subsequent gains and losses occurring after June 30, 2017 are being amortized over no more than 20-year periods as required by statute. On average, roughly 80% of the employer contribution rate for state employees goes towards paying off the UAL. Trustees continue to strengthen the plan by adopting sound actuarial assumptions recommended by the system's actuaries as required under the New Hampshire Constitution. Actuarial assumptions were revised following a recent experience study for the period 2016 through 2019, including a reduction in the assumed rate of return from 7.25% to 6.75%. This change, together with demographic and economic assumptions, will generate contribution increases for all public employers for the next biennium. I will take a few minutes to review the highlights document and then talk about our goals and objectives before turning things over to Gerard for the budget overview. The highlight document, which is before you. We completed an actuarial experience study in June, which resulted in adjustments to a number of actuarial assumptions. We reduced the assumed rate of return from 7.25% to 6.75%. The inflation assumption was reduced from 2.5% to 2%, and the payroll growth factor was reduced from 3.75% to 3.25% for police, fire, and employees, while for teachers, it was reduced from 2.75% to 2.25% in response to continued anticipated decline in the school age population in New Hampshire. Through tremendous teamwork, NHRS staff maintained normal business operations despite shifting most staff to remote work in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All benefit payments to retirees and beneficiaries were made on time. In addition, there were no delays in processing retirement applications. Our investment performance for fiscal year 2020 was 1.1%. The 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, and 25-year returns for the periods ended June 30, 2020 were 5.2%, 5.9%, 8.7%, 5.4%, and 7.5% respectively. The 6-month return through December 31, 2020 was 14.5%. All returns are net of fees. Compared to the members of the Investor Force Public Defined Benefit Net Universe, NHRS performed better than 70% of its peers over the past 10 fiscal years. In addition, as of February 28, 2021, NHRS assets were at $10.4 billion. Following the recent actuarial experience study, the board certified employer contribution rates for fiscal years 2022 and 2023 in September. Rates increased by 20% on average. The funded ratio on the pension plan was 61% in fiscal year 2020, up from 60.8% in fiscal year 2019. We implemented a one-time 1.5% COLA for eligible retirees and beneficiaries, which was enacted during the 2019 legislative session and effective beginning July 1, 2020. NHRS earned a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for our report dated June 30, 2020. You may access this report on our website. We continue to expand education and outreach to members and employers through live and virtual presentations, written materials, and online content. We also develop targeted educational presentations geared to new and mid-career members. And we've also developed a comprehensive employer resource page on our website. We continue to maintain administrative and investment expenses at favorable levels as compared to peer pension plans. Our ongoing initiatives to improve efficiency at NHRS include creating a contact center to enhance customer service by centralizing all phone, email, fax, and walk-in customer interactions in one operating unit with enhanced technology, effective metrics, and elevated security to ensure caller identification. Operations began in December. We are now in the second year of the 4-year project to upgrade our core pension application, Pension Gold, from the 17-year-old version 2 to version 3, the PGV3 project. The project is now 38% completed. Staff has made a number of substantial changes to the security infrastructure to further improve the security of NHRS's data and assets. The changes include contracting with new external security operations center for 24/7/365 monitoring for threats, external third-party vulnerability and penetration testing, increased cybersecurity testing for all staff, and in-depth user auditing to limit access to key systems. And here's a summary of the significant challenges and opportunities faced by NHRS. The experience study prepared by our actuary and subsequent adjustments to actuarial assumptions generated impactful rate increases for employers, but continue the process of ensuring that the funding of the system is in alignment with anticipated costs for providing benefits. After a successful migration to remote work for most employees due to COVID-19, we have developed a phased strategy for returning to the office and maintaining high-quality customer service while at the same time maximizing staff and visitor health and safety. Partial reopening targeted to begin July 1. The impact of recent legislation on NHRS, there was no retirement system related legislation passed in the 2020 session. The cost of living adjustment legislation that was enacted in 2019 increased the system's unfunded liability by $65 million. This legislation authorized a one-time 1.5% COLA on the first $50,000 of an annual pension benefit to members who retired on or before July 1, 2014, or any beneficiary of such member who is receiving a survivor pension benefit. The cost of the COLA is being amortized over 20 years through an increase in employer contribution rates beginning in fiscal year 2022. And now for a brief overview of our budget. The operations portion of the NHRS statutory administrative budget has been held relatively flat, with spending well under the budgeted amounts for the past 8 years. The statutory administrative budget is funded by the trust, not the general fund. The cost impact of a multi-year upgrade for our 17-year-old core pension database application first appeared in actual spending in fiscal year 2019 and in budgeted amounts in fiscal year 2020. Implementation costs associated with this project are expected through fiscal year 2024. The upgrade will improve the application from a standalone client server platform, PGV2, to a web-based system with enhanced cybersecurity and functionality, PGV3. At this point, I will turn the microphone over to Gerard Murphy, who will walk you through our budget.
Okay. Thanks, Jan. Appreciate it. All right, so now we're into the numbers. I'm not sure if you can see the numbers that are in the table on page 2 of our handout, but speaking directly to that table, you'll notice on line 2, you'll see the salaries and benefits for NHRS. We are a personnel-heavy operation. The salaries and benefits charges make up about 62% of our total statutory administrative budget. And you'll see here, salaries and benefits are, relatively flat, going from 21 adjusted authorized over to the 22-23 proposals. Salaries by themselves, we actually, it's actually the 22 proposal is actually slightly lower than the 21 adjusted authorized. And then there's some growth in 23. A big portion of the growth you see in salaries in 23 relates to that 27th pay period, which I'm sure you've heard about from other agencies up to this point. And then on the benefit side of things, we have experienced the increase in the employer contribution rates for NHRS, as well as the forecasted growth rates in health insurance, employee health insurance, which we based off of the estimates provided by the Department of Administrative Services. Moving on, after salaries and benefits, line 4, these are our software and hardware expenses, separate from what you'll see in PGV3. So this is everything other than the Pension Gold version 3 upgrade project. This is all of our hardware, software, security features for our traditional operations. And again, as you can see, line 4, we are flat 22-23 with the 21 adjusted authorized. Moving on to the next section, all other administrative costs. Again, we realizing the state of the economy and the uncertainty, we kept things as flat as we could, and we actually, both years, 22 and 23, the subtotal for all of our other administrative costs was below the fiscal 21 adjusted authorized. And then, Marty, if you don't mind scrolling down a little bit, down to the PGV3 project. Again, you'll see that, so the PGV3 project estimates, again, the bulk of what you see in the estimated expenses for PGV3 are related to the implementation payments we have with our software vendor. There are 6 positions associated with the project, which are also included in that amount. But as you'll notice, we drop down in the fiscal 22 proposal and down even further as we progress in the project for the 23 proposal. For a bottom line, on line 20, we've got a total growth of 0.2%, 12.314 in 22, and then a decline, total budget 12.158, decline of 1.3% in 23. And with that, we would be happy to try and answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I'm looking at the PGV3 project. My first question is, why wasn't this part of the capital budget?
I believe because of our nature as a component unit of the state, we do not typically, our spending does not typically show up in the capital project, in the capital budget.
Okay, follow up. So now I'm looking at the actuals for 2020 and the budget for 21. What line will I see the 1 million actual and the 2.8 million budget for 19 and 20? When I'm sorry, I'm looking at page 196 in my budget book.
Yep, on your compare report. Let's see. So the 1 million actual in 20, correct?
Yes.
That was, the bulk of that would show up in the class 38, the software, and the vast majority of that $1 million that you saw in 20 related to a payment to our software vendor. So the majority of that amount was in class 38. There were some charges for salaries and benefits as well associated with a couple of the positions associated with the project. And then similarly, same sort of thing for fiscal 21. The lion's share of the charges, it's about between 70 and 72% of what you see associated with the project shows up in the class 37 and 38 for payments to the software vendor for the implementation of the project.
Follow up.
So just looking at your 2020 actuals, I would expect to see a much smaller number in 37 and 38 because of the 1.8 million differential between the 2 years, between actual and budget. Were you running parallel software systems or what's going on there?
No, we're still running our version 2. None of that has changed. We won't be running parallel until in all likelihood 2023, the middle of 2023. So we are running both. We are running version 2 and we are implementing version 3, design documents, requirement setting, a host of other things in order to get ourselves set up to implement in 2023. So that's when we will go live with the new upgrade to the 3rd version of the software.
My final question, hopefully, is that, so I would expect to see at least 1.8 million between 2020 and 2021 in those lines, but I only see about 600,000.
Let's see. So if you could just walk me through where you would expect to see that again, please, if you don't mind.
Well, you said the costs for the system are in 37 and 38.
Correct.
And the actual for 20 was 1 million and the budget, the actual for, I think that's what I'm getting caught up on. Oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong number. My apologies.
No, it's confusing to look at it and with different summations and whatnot. So Is there a question I can help you with?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, well, if you have questions, certainly feel free to reach out after this presentation as well. We're always happy to answer questions, so.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps I'm a little bit uninformed, but I have a problem correlating what's on this sheet to what's in the compare. And I would like a presentation item by item, line item by line item that matches that. Does that make sense? Am I the only one that has this issue? I reached salaries and benefits. How am I supposed to figure out which line in there is going to, how much of that totals up to those benefits? So your presentation is great, except it doesn't give me anything to relate it back to line item by line item in the budget. And I'd like to have that presented.
Okay, well, I can get you to, I can at least tie the total, just so you're assured that the total ties. If you look on page, let's see, 199.
I can see the total. I can
Okay.
see the total, but I want details. We're in the detail business here. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, and we'll await the information that
You bet.
was asked for.
You bet. That we'll pull that together and get it over to you folks.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, and have yourselves a great day.
You as well.
Bye-bye. Next presentation is with the Department of Revenue Administration. And you do have a handout on that. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Such a long time.
Good afternoon. Very nice to see you again. It's been a couple hours.
So I think we're ready whenever you are, Commissioner.
Okay, great. You should have a handout that says testimony of Commissioner Lindsay Stepp. I'm Lindsay Stepp, Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, and then a presentation that I will walk through as well. So good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present the fiscal year 22 and 23 operating budget for the Department of Revenue. With me today is Carolyn Lear, Assistant Commissioner at the DRA, and Business Administrator Shelley Grilano. As you're probably familiar, the mission of the DRA is to fairly and efficiently administer the tax laws of the state of New Hampshire, collecting the proper amount of taxes due, incurring the least cost to taxpayers in a manner that merits the highest degree of public confidence in our integrity. Further, we provide prompt and constructive assistance to the municipal units of government in matters of budget, finance, and the appraisal of real estate. Together, we have developed a thoughtful operating budget that will provide the resources for our team to administer the tax laws of the state for another 2 fiscal years in a manner that is consistent with this mission. We work closely with the Governor's Office and House Finance Division 1 in developing this budget, consistent with the targets provided, and believe this budget sufficiently funds DRA operations for the next biennium. In fiscal year 2020, the DRA collected $2.2 billion in state revenue with total expenses of less than $19.4 million, some of which is for activities unrelated to revenue collection, such as local assessment reviews, and state aid. When those unrelated costs are accounted for, our cost of collection is 0.75%. The information included with this testimony explain how we were able to build a biennial budget that continues to be an unparalleled return on state tax dollar investment. And we look forward to working with you as you continue to develop the next 2-year operating budget. Moving to the presentation, I'll walk through this. The second page includes our mission, which I just read in my opening testimony, but I wanted to include here for your reference. On page 3, you'll see a simplified organizational chart for the Department of Revenue. On the left, you'll see the administration unit that includes all of our back office functions along with the Commissioner's office. The audit division does exactly that. They are the division primarily responsible for auditing taxpayers. The collections division is the division that's responsible for collecting past due amounts. Taxpayer Services Division, that's going to be your primary contact or place of contact if you are not under audit and we are not looking to collect from you. So that's the division that mans our call center. They process all of our revenue and tax documents, and they perform maintenance on taxpayer accounts. Lastly, on the right, you'll have the Municipal and Property Division. This is the division that's primarily responsible with performing those assessment reviews and working closely with municipal units of government in the matters of finance, budgeting, etc. On page 4, I have included a big picture overview of the DRA's budget. You will see fiscal year 21 adjusted authorized, and then fiscal years 22 and 23 amounts provided in the House budget. You will see that I have broken it down between general fund, education trust fund, and agency income. Most of our budget is from general funds. You will see a decrease in fiscal year 22 of just over $800,000 compared to fiscal year 21, and then an increase in 23 of just over $20,000. Again, as you've heard, that's primarily due to the additional pay period in fiscal year 23. Moving down to the education trust fund, you'll see a reduction of $950,000 in fiscal year 22 when compared to 21. I'll cover this in a later slide. This is really just some right sizing of our appropriation. And then lastly, agency income. This is flat over the biennium compared to fiscal year 21. All in all, that results in a 7.7% reduction in fiscal year 22 as compared to fiscal year 21, and a 4.4% reduction in fiscal year 23 as compared to fiscal year 21. Our total position count remains static over the biennium. However, when we're looking at those positions that are funded, in fiscal year 21, we have 156 full-time classified and unclassified positions, and that amount drops to 152 positions in fiscal years 22 and 23. The detail of that difference is provided on the next page, on slide 5. So our general fund operating budget is 75% salary and benefits. We are a department of people, not things or programs. The following positions are unfunded in the budget, and they also remain currently vacant, so we're not looking at any layoffs here. You'll see a clerk 3 in our taxpayer services division, a tax examiner 1, 2 tax examiner 2s in the taxpayer services division, and a municipal accounts auditor in our municipal and property division. Funding in the budget does include positions in that bottom chart. These positions are vacant currently, but when they are filled, they would generate revenue. And these are primarily our audit positions, ranging from an in-state auditor, which audits New Hampshire businesses, a multi-entity auditor, which would be auditing more of your regional businesses. And then you'll see 3 multi-state auditors. Those are the ones auditing the larger Fortune 500 multinational corporations. Our budget coming out of the governor's office had 1 position there, and the House did decide to fund 2 additional positions. Lastly, you'll see a supervisor within our collections division, and that assists with some of the more complex collection efforts or our larger collection efforts. So in total, these positions, we would estimate about $700,000 in revenue in fiscal year 22 and about $6.2 million in fiscal year 23. Moving on to slide 6, just some highlights of our budget. Our DOIT services and positions are maintained. The efficiency budget and the budget provided by the House reduce our funding for DOIT by approximately 8.7% as compared to fiscal year 21. This is primarily direct cost to DRA, and this is the result of our implementation of our new RIMS system, where we're able to transition some of those functions into RIMS, and we're able to reduce costs for our direct DOIT services. You will also see funding for key vendors such as our equalization and tax rate setting and temporary keying services are included within the budget. The equalization and tax rate setting contract amount is reduced to reflect some updated contract pricing that is included on page 171 of the change report. Our temporary keying services contract amount is also reduced to reflect actual costs over the past few years as more and more taxpayers are filing electronically. We see a reduced need for these supplemental keying services, and that change can be seen on page 167. The budget also maintains our operational capabilities as we anticipate adjusting resources for our new revenue information management system project. We do show the elimination of RIMS consulting services, which you will see on page 163. These services were actually able to be absorbed into our capital budget. So we didn't need this operating budget appropriation. So we're able to eliminate those amounts for fiscal years 22 and 23. Other reductions include out-of-state travel, employee training, and overtime, as well as current expense. You will see a note on page 6 of an additional $100,000 for out-of-state travel and $10,000 of employee training. This is not included in the House budget, but I would ask for the Senate to consider these amounts. These would help us as we onboard those additional multi-state auditor positions that the House included. We took a closer look at our budget after those positions were added, and we do feel like these amounts would help us ensure that we could appropriately onboard those employees. It's particularly important with multi-state auditors because they do travel in pairs when they are training. So that is the reason for the request of the additional out-of-state travel money, and the additional $10,000 in employee training will also help us make sure that we can appropriately onboard those employees. As I mentioned previously, the division directors, the business office, and other managers worked really hard to budget conservatively and accurately, really requesting funds for needs and not wants. On page 7, I note the low and moderate property tax relief program. This is the amounts in the budget summary from the Education Trust Fund. So this is a property tax relief program related to the statewide education property tax, or SWEPT, and this is supported by an appropriation from the Education Trust Fund. We've requested $800,000 in both fiscal years 22 and 23, and that can be seen on page 176 of the change report. As I mentioned, this funding reflects a decline in the total program costs over the past few years. You can see the costs were $1.2 million in 18, $1.1 million in 19, and $700,000 in fiscal year 20. So again, a right sizing of the appropriation. I will note that the $800,000 does not take into account any proposed changes to the amount of SWEPT that would be collected, or any changes to the low and moderate relief program. This is specifically in reference to the House Bill 2 reduction of $100 million of SWEPT in fiscal year 23, and House Bill 486, which makes changes to the low and moderate program, which were estimated by the sponsor to cost somewhere between $4 and $5 million. So if either one of those changes passed, we would need to look at adjusting the appropriation for the low and moderate program. Moving on to page 8, I wanted to note flood control. So flood control is a topic we've talked about many years in a row here. The total appropriation is $887,000. That is a combination of both general fund and other funds, and that amount is consistent in fiscal years 22 and 23. You will see this on page 172 of the change report. So flood control is where the department reimburses cities and towns for lost property taxes resulting from the acquisition of land by the United States for navigations and flood control. This is also referred to as the Merrimack River Valley Compact and the Connecticut River Valley Compact. The fiscal year 22 and 23 budget assumes that the state of Massachusetts will reimburse their share of the Merrimack River Valley Compact, which is 70%, as well as 50% of the Connecticut River Valley Compact, and that Connecticut will reimburse their share of the Connecticut River Valley Compact, which is 40%. However, there is a long history of Massachusetts not paying its obligation timely or sufficiently with both the Merrimack River Valley Compact and with the Connecticut River Valley Compact. The amounts outstanding for fiscal years 15 to 20 is just under $3 million. The amounts prior to fiscal year 20, or excuse me, fiscal year 15, those were settled by a previous agreement. So the governor is authorized to draw a warrant for the payment of this reimbursement out of funds in the treasury not otherwise appropriated, so that the towns are made whole, even if Massachusetts does not fulfill their obligation. And we did request a warrant for fiscal year 21, just over $600,000. This issue with Massachusetts is very well known to both the governor's office and the attorney general's office. And DOJ is actively working on this issue in terms of attempting mediation with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Moving on to slide 9, I did just want to provide an update on the priorities from our last budget, fiscal years 20 and 21. The first is an update on RIMS. As you may remember, DRA received a $30,160,000 capital appropriation to replace our old TIMS system. We entered into a contract with Fast Enterprises on October 31st of 2018 to implement their off-the-shelf software called Gentax with a cost just under $30 million. RIMS will go live in 3 rollouts. The first rollout went live on October 28th, 2019 with the meals and rentals tax, Medicaid enhancement tax, and nursing facilities tax. Rollout 2 went live on time, despite the pandemic, on October 5th, 2020, with the business profits tax, business enterprise tax, interest and dividends tax, and communication services tax. And we're already seeing great use of RIMS during this current filing season. And then rollout 3 is scheduled to go live, and we are on track to go live on August 9th of 2021 with the real estate transfer tax, tobacco tax, utility property tax, gravel tax, timber tax, and railroad and private car. So as I mentioned, rollout 1 and rollout 2 were very successful, and we anticipate a similar outcome for rollout 3. And our current contract includes 4 years of support and maintenance on the system after rollout 3, with optional extensions after that. So we are in a really good place with respect to our RIMS project. As I mentioned earlier, we did have a consulting contract that starts at the top of page 10 to perform RIMS health assessments. And this was included in the last budget as a prioritized need for $340,000 in fiscal years 20 and 21 in order for us to complete these health assessments. To date, Barry Dunn has completed 6 project health assessments, all of which gave the project an overall score of 5 or outstanding, with no actions or changes recommended. We have 1 health assessment remaining. As I mentioned, the funding for that is included in the capital budget, so we do not need the operating budget appropriation for that. Lastly, in terms of staffing, we did have some additional positions added in the fiscal year 2021 budget. That included an in-state and multi-entity auditor for 20 and 21, 2 multi-state auditors for half of 20 and all of 21, and a multi-state auditor funded for 21. All of these positions remain unfilled. By the time the positions were created and we began recruiting, obviously the pandemic hit and we experienced the hiring freeze. So they remain unfilled, but they are funded in the budget that was included coming out of the House for both years. And we look forward to the actively recruiting for these positions once the budget has passed. That is the end of my prepared presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. On page 7, you mentioned a couple bills that would impact the cost of the property tax relief program. Could you just repeat what those bills were?
Sure. Sure. House Bill 2 has the swept reduction of $100 million in fiscal year 23. The low and moderate property tax relief reimburses eligible property owners for a portion of the swept that was paid. So if there's a reduction in the swept, there is the chance that we could see the reduction in the low and moderate property tax claims. Probably more importantly is House Bill 486. And that bill makes changes to the program by updating the property tax owners that would qualify for the program. And though it would also update the amounts that the property owners would receive. The Department of Revenue doesn't have specific data in order to calculate the exact fiscal impact of that, but I believe during testimony in the Senate, the sponsor of House Bill 486 calculated a rough estimate of 4 to 5 million. So obviously our $800,000 appropriation would not cover that. So we would need to receive an additional appropriation in order to cover those changes if they were to pass.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Twice in one day is just twice as good as it can be. Have you got all of your people that you assigned to the Gulf office? Are they back with you now?
They are not. At our high point, we had 5 employees there. 1 employee has since left state service. So I do still have 4 employees at Gopher.
Further question?
Further question?
When do you expect them to be back at your shop?
I don't have a specific date as of yet. Commissioner Caswell and I have been playing a bit of phone tag in order to discuss the potential return date of those employees. So I don't have an exact date as of yet.
Further question? And of the employees that were given to you in the last budget, have you filled those slots?
Those positions all remain vacant. By the time the positions were created and available for us to hire, given the continuing resolution of the last budget, we were looking at the holidays and decided that hiring during the holidays was probably not the most ideal time. Coming out of the holidays, we quickly went into COVID and the hiring freeze. So those positions do remain vacant.
Just one further, do you expect to bring those people on at some point?
Yes, those all of those positions are included in the House budget. And so as soon as the budget's passed, we would anticipate actively recruiting for those positions. We're very anxious to get those people in-house.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? I do have one question on page 4. I'm trying to get the narrative to match the number. You indicate in the chart that there are 157 total number of full-time positions, but then underneath you said that the current funded position count has decreased from 156 full-time. So
Correct. In our current budget in fiscal year 21, we do have 1 unfunded position.
okay, thank you.
That's how you go from the 157 to 156. Great question. That position remains unfunded in fiscal years 22 and 23, and that is the clerk 3 position in taxpayer services. And then we added the additional positions to that in terms of unfunding.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I think we're all set, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. And finally, we'll bring in the Department of Administrative Services.
Here I am. Hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Well, there we go. Good. Sorry, I was gonna say we were having a problem with technology, but we typically means me, because everybody else is pretty good. My name is Charlie Arlinghouse. I am the Commissioner of Administrative Services for the state of New Hampshire, which I hope means I'm in the right hearing. Behind me here is Joe Bouchard, who's the Assistant Commissioner. And here is Cassie Keene, who's the Deputy Commissioner. And then over here, oh, it's too close, is Sarah Trask, who is our Chief Financial Officer. And they're here in case you ask difficult questions, because I can do a presentation, but for the hard stuff, we need to go to smart people. I'm going to go through, I trust you have the slides. And so I'm going to take my mask off my ear so it doesn't look like weird jewelry, and go through the slides. Page 2 of our presentation is total funds and general fund budget request. Just a synopsis of where we are in terms of both total funds and general funds. For the rest of the slides, I'll present general funds because that's sort of the big picture item. But this is kind of where we are. And as you can see, there's a modest or enormous, if you prefer, decrease in the amount of general funds. We spend about 15%, which to my mind is a lot of money. Something we're very proud of, and we'll talk about this. I will say this though, what you're looking at is the administrative services budget. This does not include the administratively attached groups over which we have no control. Commission on Aging, the Office of the Child Advocate, the Housing Appeals Board, and the Conservation Land Stewardship Program that's promised. The House phase also included a 5th administratively attached unit, which was going to come here called LEAC, I think, Law Enforcement Accountability Commission, I believe. That was eliminated in a floor amendment of the House. So obviously that's also not in here, but so this is our department as opposed to the administratively attached agencies where, as you know, we merely pass their budget through to you and we're not allowed to touch it. I will talk about, I want to talk to you a little bit as an overview about who we are and what we do. And so that's why this presentation is organized this way. We're a central service agency that consists of 7 major divisions. And then I'll present this with an 8th being the quote unquote commissioner's office, which is where other important things reside, including the budget office, which some people might consider a division, even though it's not technically so. But I'll go through it that way. And in the course of doing it, I'll give you a sense of who we are and what we do. What we do is very diverse, as most of you know, but a critical function to state government. I think there's no agency that we don't touch. There's no agency that doesn't rely on us. And I emphasize this all the time with our employees, and they take it very much for granted that if we don't do a good job, other people can't do a good job. And they're counting on us, and we have to make sure that we're worthy of that trust. So the first piece is the commissioner's office on slide 3. The top of your slides will identify the page numbers of the compare report. And so the commissioner's office is 64 to 71 is the accounting notes there. It's obviously not just the commissioner's office. It includes a bunch of things. The Office of Cost Containment, our Rules and Procedures Office, which does a lot of work on administrative rules. Our Central Finance Office, which isn't just Sarah, but includes Sarah. The Deferred Comp Program, which is entirely self-funded or non-generally funded. And then most important for a lot of you is the State Budget Office. Joe Bouchard is Assistant Commissioner, heads the State Budget Office. The business supervisors work with every agency, as you know, and the state budget could not be put together without them. They work on the presentation, the document. There's no document that you do not have in front of you that is not in front of you as a direct result of the budget office's work. And there's a reason that it foots, and every document that we do foots. And it's a very important thing so that you're not getting sloppy work. They are the behind the scenes part of state government that everyone counts on. And without them, the governor and council process literally doesn't work either. There's no significant change to this department, although you can, or this activity code, although you can see at the bottom, it's a relatively modest 31,000 in the first year. The second year is 300,000. And this is a theme you'll see without our office is very personnel funded. We are mostly people, the exception of plant and property we'll talk about differently, but we're mostly people. And in the second year of the budget, there's a 27th pay period. So 26 pay periods most years, almost every year, but every 10 or 11 years, there is a 27th pay period. And this is adjusted for in the accounting system because of changes made about 15 years ago through a gap adjustment process where we do a single day gap adjustment each year. And then there's a true up at the end. So although it shows up as a budget number, it's budgetarily not affected in gap. That's the commissioner's office accounting unit. The second accounting unit I'm going to talk about, or activity, I should say, I'm going to talk about is on page 4 of my slides, is the Division of Accounting Services, sometimes called oddly VOA. Accounting, the accounting is run by the state comptroller. We do all the accounting for the system for the state, including the CAFR, or I guess we're now calling it the ACFR. which is the audited statement without which the state couldn't operate. You know, you don't do your books, you can't operate as an entity. In addition to that, we process payroll for more than 13,000 people. That's a big function. I said to someone once that we miss a paycheck and I'm probably not going to be allowed to show up on the next day. And that's true for all of us. And we do 192,000 audited payments. The pre-auditing process and the appropriation process and the warrant process are all done through this. Some of you know more than others. I think most of you understand that accounting is one of those things that is critically important and that everyone takes for granted. We have as good an accounting staff as we've ever had in the history of the division, I think. And obviously, again, there's a modest change there. The change in the second year is very large as well. The third division I want to talk about is the division of personnel on page 5. Statewide personnel is obviously a thing, hiring, recruiting, training for everybody in the state. One important thing to note about this, there's a bureau within the Division of Personnel called the Bureau of Education and Training. We're responsible for training. I don't know if you notice this. I keep looking up at the TV screen in front of me, but the camera's down here, so it looks like I'm looking up at the ceiling. So I hope that's not as distracting to you as it is to me. So I'm going to try to look at the camera. Bureau of Education and Training. Obviously, a part of personnel is making sure people are trained, whether it's learning Excel skills, whether it's teaching fundamentals of state supervision, whether it's running a certified public manager program. This is a function that used to be about half and half general funds and tuition payments. And we were challenged by the governor this year to make it 100% tuition funded, which we're doing. It will be in 2022. It's almost in 2021, 100% tuition funded. Essentially, if the course can't support itself and the costs of the Bureau, we won't offer it. And that's a sort of a market technique there. Personnel has been a significant challenge over the last, certainly over the last 13 months of the pandemic. As most of you know, the personnel issues come up constantly and all the time. There's a very, obviously a very modest change to this division and a larger change in the second division, or in the second year, which is going to be, you're going to see the story of our agency, frankly, is one of flat funding. I said in the first two phases of the budget process, in the, well, I guess the first three phases, right? The agency phase, the governance phase, the House phase. My conversations with the various powers that be was, what I'm asking for is nothing. What we would really like as an agency is nothing. But what we would not like is less than nothing. So our battle has been to allow us to have what we have and not ask for more, and to lock in the savings that we've provided for you. But that is what we're doing as an agency. We're trying to get nothing out of you, and I hope that you'll grant us more or less nothing. Moving on from personnel, I want to talk about plant and property. I'm talking about these in the same order that they're in the compare report, and with the page numbers mentioned in the compare report, in case you're following along that way. Plant and property is a big thing. We manage more than 90 buildings, around 90 buildings, depends what you count as a building exactly. But basically, we manage all the state office buildings. We don't do the prison. We don't do patient occupied buildings like hospitals, Glencliff, Veterans Home. But if it's an office-ish building and a bunch of others, that's us. More than 4 million square feet of office space. We also help with the leases of a few 100,000 square feet of office space. 30 leased buildings, largely in court facilities. So obviously we do the State House, we do the Annex, we do the LOB, we do the State Office Park South, we do Hazen Drive, we do pick something and we're in charge of it. This is a very difficult and complex thing because the state physical plant is decaying rapidly. And every year we fund it just a little tiny bit. So we have, maybe $100 million or more than that at this point in deferred maintenance. And we know that we're going to get to 1 to 2 million of that over the next year, of the 100 to 120 million in deferred maintenance. But It's an extraordinarily dedicated staff. This is also where most of the part-time workers of our agency are, more than 100 of them. An extraordinarily dedicated staff that does a lot with nothing. And they're very good at it. This area is very much like DOT, where it is funded by transfers from other agencies, right? The point of the accounting system is that each accounting unit is a program accounting unit, if you will. Some of you are old enough to remember when we called them PAUs. And it's meant to identify the cost of the program. So what happens is the cost is in the program. The money is then transferred to plant and property because we centralize the maintenance. It doesn't make sense to have for every accounting unit to have a carpenter when we can have 2 or 3 and spread them across the whole physical plant. So it's about 86% funded with transfers, and there are obviously some general fund components of this. The change in this, you'll see a reduction if you look at page 7 of about $850,000. That's because sheriff reimbursement was shifted to the judicial branch. We reimburse sheriff deputies. We have no control over that. We don't administer it. We don't have anything to do with it. We just paid the bill. And we talked to the House about, prioritizing the payment because of course they don't appropriate as much as the counties would like to get from them. And we wanted to do it fairly, and Representative Ober, I think, this was a good idea, moved it to the judicial branch budget, which is where it sits today. That's the savings. People know that last year we struggled with Concord Steam. Concord Steam went out of business in 2016, essentially, and the state was left scrambling to figure out how to heat its buildings because that steam plant, which had decayed beyond recognition, wasn't functioning anymore. There were 26 different capital projects in one lump sum, which cost about $27 million. It's finishing, and the buildings are being heated. I have heat today, for example. A portion of the capital bond, some of that was funded through an appropriation in 2017. Some was funded through a capital appropriation. The savings that we're generating by switching to gas instead of the steam plant are paying off some of those bonds. That was taken out of the last budget in the House Bill 4 process by accident, we were told. And it came back in, and it's something that on a bipartisan basis, people tend to agree with. So that is back in. So that's the change there. I'm gonna flip the page to page 8 and turn to procurement and support services. We buy stuff. This is actually the piece of the agency. I described our agency once as like a giant English muffin with lots of little nooks and crannies that the butter melts into, or peanut butter if you like. Melts into. This is it. This is the portion of our agency that has the most nooks and the most crannies. There are a lot of little pieces here. Surplus food, surplus property. At New Hampshire, unlike the federal government, when we get rid of property, sells it. Federal government just gives it away. We take it sometimes. But we sell property for a quote unquote profit. We have a surplus food program where we distribute to hundreds of school districts and food banks around the state surplus federal food. The old New Hampshire Distributing Agency, if you remember back that far. We have a P-card program, which is where we buy things with a credit card. We have a merchant card program where people buy things from us with a credit card. We have a fleet management program. We have a graphic services program with lots of little programs. They reside in procurement. The big thing we do is purchasing. The oldest part of this agency is procurement. The state purchasing agent was established in 1915, I think, maybe 1913. Don't hold me to that. And it's the oldest part. We bid lots of stuff, and we bid stuff because it saves people money and it gives everybody a shot at state business. It is a wonderful thing. It's run by a very dedicated staff who has had more put on them during the pandemic stuff than any other part of the agency, and people have stepped up. A guy who was an assistant in the purchasing program became the state warehouse manager because he happened to have done that once in his past. It has nothing to do with his job. And he did that. We have people on loan buying stuff. Once we got involved, instead of buying stuff, gallons from China for $3.50, we got them for 87 cents from Minnesota. All sorts of good things happening. The one thing we're doing in here is moving the P-card program. P-card stands for purchasing card. Instead of buying this is a program that started where instead of buying things with field purchase orders, where I walk into Home Depot and I'm like, I have a whatever, and it's a field purchase order. No, with modest accountability, depending on whether or not you can read the handwriting of the guy who wrote it, we establish a P card where I walk in and I go, instead, here you go. Can you put it on my card? And we get a rebate for that card. That process has grown. And as it has grown, we need to be agnostic in a state about whether we're buying stuff with a check or with a card. There's sometimes a good reason to do one or the other, but regardless, we're meant to do the same things. So I've asked to merge this program into the purchasing unit instead of it being off budget. I don't like things as a general rule being off budget. 2 years ago, you'll remember that we brought the portion of the Bureau of Education and Training that had existed off budget on budget, because I thought for transparency that made sense. I think the same thing here. There's a very modest general fund impact to this, positive general fund impact. We reduced general fund spending by somewhere between, say, $50,000 and $75,000. But that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it for transparency and because purchasing should be purchasing regardless of why you're purchasing. House Bill 2 makes a slight change to graphic services to make it, we have a Bureau of Graphic Services, which buys graphic services for the whole state, printing and photocopying, think of it that way. It's run out of the Hills Avenue or Store Street warehouse, if you know where that is, kind of across from Market Basket in Concord. It's not a revolving fund. So every year there's a little bit extra left in it, like $15 to $30 million, $15 to $30,000 that's left over. The problem is what we want to do is set aside money to pay for when somebody leaves state services, a significant payout. For general fund payouts, you get paid out for your sick time and your annual leave and your retirement payout. For general fund, that's a function of the salary adjustment fund. For non-general fund, it's not a function of anything. So you have to try to figure out some way to eat it. What we'd like to do is set it aside. Why does this matter for a little small thing? It matters because it's a great place to work. And I tell the story about I went down touring the various facilities that we manage. I'm talking to a guy on the print shop floor. This is 3 years ago. And I said, wow, 41 years, that's a long time. And he said, yeah, and I'm not even the senior guy on the floor. And he points across to another guy, Dave, who'd been there at that time 43 years, it's 46 now. When Dave leaves, we're gonna get hit. So what I wanna do is have graphics pay for graphics. We just have a minor revolving fund because this is what we do with surplus property. This is what we do with surplus food. It's the natural function for something like this, that it carries over. I'm going to talk to you at the end of the presentation about one other change I want to make. I talked about accounting units being a program accounting unit. Graphics is for historical reasons which don't make sense anymore, divided into 3 separate accounting units from a time when photocopying and printing were very, very different things, and they just aren't anymore. It's a spectrum, realistically. And I want to merge them into one accounting unit so that you'll see how much we spend on graphic services. And there's not all kinds of behind the scenes transferring back and forth between accounting units that obscure, that make it seem like we have some costs here and some costs here when they really are merged. I'll talk about that at the end. Page 9 in your program, the Division of Public Works. We build things. As a state, we build things and we have engineers oversee the process. We meet certain standards. We don't just put up a building as best we can. We do design work. We have engineers, we have architects, and we have, as important as anything else, construction management. While we're building, we have somebody watching stuff. They do, the old fashioned thing was a slump test with the concrete, right? You do a cone and see how quickly it spreads. We now actually, I'm told, do a concrete break at 7/14/28 to make sure that the concrete they're giving you meets certain standards, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, we paid for 12 of those, not 3, that kind of thing. Those are called clerks. This is a portion of the agency that is partially funded by fees from other agencies and partially generally funded. The law 21 I-79, 80 and 81 the law says that we cannot use general funds to support non-generally funded agencies. On federal construction projects, we're meant to make sure that the federal share of that is paid. And so that's the agency income portion of this. And I mentioned that the construction oversight piece, Clerk of the Works, is largely, maybe not, maybe 96%, not 100%, self-funded, because we bill against capital projects for construction oversight based on a provision in House Bill 25 that has persisted for 12, 14 years, which I think I was once told Senator Morse authored, but I'm not positive on that, so I won't say it out loud. Flipping to page 10, financial data management. One of the most important and least known portions of the agency. We run a computer system. This is one of the only computer things that's not a DOIT. New Hampshire First is the state's enterprise resource computer system. It's not just financial data management. It's the system that manages the budget, the statement of appropriations, the financial system of the state, but also the human resources administration of the state, what in some companies would be called an HRIS. This is the giant thing that controls state government. It is the computer backbone of state government. There's a division that manages it and makes sure that basically everything in state government happens. This is where there's some increases. The DOIT needs increased by about $220,000. That's part of that giant DOIT budget, which they can explain to you and probably no one else on the planet can. The biggest project we're looking at, we're constantly upgrading, right? Because when people remember from the ERP 10, 12 probably years ago, that we got into trouble because we hadn't ever upgraded our system. So it became this archaic system that like three people knew how to use and they were retiring, and was kept together with paperclip and baling wire. We don't want that to happen, so we keep updating constantly throughout the years. Version 6, version 7. It's why you're not using Windows 95 anymore on your home computer. You're probably, I hope you're not using Windows 95. You've probably upgraded a system or two since then. You're at least at Windows ME, I hope. We're moving to the cloud. And the cloud is two things. It's a shorthand for moving to, instead of a physical plant, a cloud plant. That helps with disaster recovery or continuity of operations planning, because your data, your stuff isn't all in one place. It can easily be affected by a tornado or fire, let's say. It's stored around the world on the globe, probably something owned by Amazon, if we're honest. But it's also the most significant upgrade. Some upgrades to your system are more like a Windows update when you turn your computer off and it turns back on. And some are like a whole scale revision. This is not just a whole scale revision, but a big one. It's a major upgrade to the state's financial system. Does it have to happen? It does. We're probably late to the game, not early to the game. Is it going to require a lot of work? It is. Will that result in some overtime at DOIT? Yes. We thought about requesting new positions. We're better off requesting overtime, I think, because you have people who have the capacity to work a certain amount of overtime, not too much, but a certain amount, who know what they're doing, as opposed to bringing somebody in and training them and all that. And you're also not doubling up your benefits. To the extent that if the work is necessary, if you can do overtime, it saves you money, it saves you hassle, it saves you stress. And I think that's important. The other change we're making is we're going to start to buy computers. We had for the last 8 or 10 years bought computers through an old capital appropriation that was left over from the upgrade to the ERP days. Every agency is meant to upgrade its computers itself as an operating cost, not a CapEx cost. And we didn't for a long time. We didn't because it would be an increase in the budget. Well, we're done. So we need to upgrade computers. We're working on a 4 to 5 year cycle, which I presume will become a 5 to 6 year cycle, because that's what happens with things. They go down a little bit, but that's the big change there. I want to talk next on page 11, if you flip with me, about the Division of Risk and Benefits. State benefits is a big thing. Risk and benefits does a lot. They buy property and casualty insurance. Basically, they buy insurance for the state. They administer workers' comp for the state, but most important, that affects everybody, is they administer a health benefit plan for actives and retirees. I'm going to talk about the retiree health portion of the budget second as a separate thing, because it's not an operational, it's not a people and programs thing. It's something that we have to do. Risks and benefits doesn't change much. Doesn't change. There's actually a modest decrease in the amount here. There's some change in the class 211 funds, which we can talk about when we get there, but if you want to. But basically, we're not changing how much the state spends. We're changing how the checks are routed so that insurance carriers get paid timely, and we don't end up being a collection agency. There's a change in the House budget that moves cyber insurance, which used to be 100% generally funded in this budget for no particular reason except it happened once. But cybersecurity insurance, and it was there. And Representative Ober, this was a smart change, literally her idea during the governor's budget hearings in November. Why aren't we cost allocating this through DOIT like we do with everything else? And so that happened in the House phase of the budget. The next slide, which is page 12, is retiree health benefits. And I don't care, I wouldn't mind if you want to linger on this slide a little bit. Because I want you to look at the numbers and notice that that's not a dash in front of the 26% or the 19%. That's a minus. This was a very, very significant decrease. And I want to take some time on this because we're an agency that tries really hard to hit singles every day. We play small ball. That's who we are. Our job is to make sure this is a little better, and this is a little better, and this is a little better, and to make sure that this becomes a little more efficient, and this becomes a little more efficient. And we amalgamate, one thing at a time, one step at a time. Every now and again, not very often, we hit a home run. And this is a 4-bagger. This is one heck of a home run. We saved a ton of money to the state budget by switching to Medicare Advantage. This is a one-time decrease. I want to stress that you can't keep doing this. By switching to a Medicare Advantage program, it actually came out, this is my shameless suck up to the chairman. This came out of a conversation with Senator Daniels. You'll remember that Cassie Keene and I, over my shoulder, came over and met with you 3 or 4 years ago. You were talking at the time about looking for, I forget the exact name of the product that you had us look at, but Cassie might remember what it was. But it was, we were looking into it and we ended up latching onto Medicare Advantage, which had an even greater savings. And it's that kind of challenge that that helps and that frankly, our people rose to this is something Cassie deserves a ton of credit for, but Joyce Pittman and the entire staff at Risk and Benefits, this is a big savings. It was a savings in 21, it's going to be a savings in 22, and a savings in 23. It'll start going up again, but we yielded a very significant benefit from that. That is the largest source of the decrease in our funds and the savings that we allowed the state budget to allow you to address other priorities or find other savings. That's the numbers. I want to talk now on slide 13 about our amendment requests. There are a small number of them because again, I don't really want much of anything. Slide 13 is a summary of what we're going to ask for. And I'll talk about each one separately, but we're going to ask to combine graphic services into one accounting unit. We're going to mention to you the increase in insurance policy estimates that we've identified in the last few weeks. We're going to ask for a general fund request on the maintenance of the Claremont property as we try to sell it and corrections is moving out. And we're going to say that if you make the changes to the Sununu Center that the House budget anticipates, we would need to create an accounting unit for fiscal 23 because we can't just take it over without any way of doing that. We have a tweak to the NRHS subsidy language, which is an amendment to that language that stops you from having to appropriate additional general funds to pay for things that are meant to be paid for this way instead. And then I want to tell you about FMLI, which appears to maybe be dead, maybe not. If it's not dead, there's a problem that I want to identify. And then I want to talk to you about a recommendation the governor would like and the Governor's Commission on Disability would like for a part-time ADA coordinator. So quickly, page 14, graphic services. I want to combine them into one accounting unit. Right now, every year we transfer money back and forth between photocopy and print shop because photocopying and print shop are the same thing. We just figure out what machine is most efficient to print on, and to some extent, what machine is free, and it's one or the other. And then there's a separate administrative accounting unit. I want them just to be one accounting unit if we can. It's clearer, it's more transparent. It doesn't change the spending at all. It's just an accounting detail change that frankly, I think is more transparent. Page 15. These are how much premiums are going up. Real property is going up. Somebody told me it's all because of Texas. I think that's unfair. But you know, a lot of stuff happened in Texas, tornadoes, fires, that thing with the electric system, which I can't explain. And when insurance goes up around the country, it goes up everywhere. Our premiums are expected to, we're being told by our producer, excuse me, to anticipate this kind of an increase in the real property coverage. Real property is our property insurance in case, you know, the annex or the DRA building or pick somewhere catches on fire, the roof caves in, et cetera. We have $1 million deductible, and then this is our coverage for that. That would be a change. And Sarah has provided for LBA, and I think you have, a list of the actual documents which show the change. Cybersecurity is going to go up. Cybersecurity stuff's happening. Bad things are happening in cyber. It's going to go up. The amendment in the House anticipates, as we did, 306,000 in the first year, 398 in the second. Our current estimate is we're likely to have to both reduce our coverage and pay more of a premium because cyber is very unpredictable. And these are the numbers we're told to anticipate. So if you go along with the House amendment, the House Bill 1 amendment on cyber that moves it to DOIT, this number would have to be in it. Sarah will poke me if I say something stupid. Page 16, the Claremont building, old mill number 2, for those of you who read too many budgets. There is a building in Claremont that was bought when John Tucker was speaker. Or I think it was his idea, maybe, I don't know if he was speaker or majority leader, but to house state operations in Claremont. Everybody moved out of it, except HHS has a big chunk of it, most of it, and Corrections has a little chunk. HHS is looking for new space. Corrections found new space and they want to get out. We're in the process of surplusing it, but that doesn't mean the cost of running it goes away. The amendment, as you can see, the corrections piece of it is 20 grand. And what we're asking is that you replace the 20 grand transfer from corrections that will go away with the exact number, $20,394 as a transfer as a general fund expense. We will be working over the course of the fiscal year, and we've already started, both in surplusing it, trying to move HHS out eventually, or on their timetable, frankly, and then selling the building. It's not sensible for us to maintain a one-off building. You know, we have a bureau that runs a ton of buildings in Concord and one in Claremont, and it's just weird and it's difficult. And we happen to have an advantage because the guy who was there for many, many years as the sort of Johnny on the spot happened to retire. And so we haven't filled that position because it would be ideal if we don't have to. Page 17 is the Sununu Youth Center Services Center property, or YDC property in Manchester. There's a provision in House Bill 2 that would get rid of it or sell it or stop using it and transfer it to DAS, which we're agnostic about, obviously. That's a policy decision. However, if you do transfer it to us, beginning July 1st, 2023, in theory, you're going to want us to keep it up, make sure the roofs don't collapse and it becomes a mold infested hellhole like Laconia became. So to do so, we would need an accounting unit and preferably money in the accounting unit. There's an amendment which shows based on the current maintenance expenditures, how much is being spent today, and that money would need to be spent in the admin services budget in a new accounting unit, if that's possible. Page 18, House Bill 2 Amendment, Request 1. Retiree health is funded in part by a bunch of things. Medicare Advantage has changed those things a little bit. And there's an egg whip waiver for some of the prescription parts of that as well. There are some charges to individual retirees, certain individual retirees, but there's a piece of it that's a medical subsidy. And this is something that dates back to the budget of 2001, I believe. I have this vision of Jack Barnes railing about this on the floor of the House and praising the Red Sox simultaneously. They were changing the medical subsidy program for local retirees, which this, despite its name, is not related to. This is something we fund and send to NHRS and they send back. And there are reasons that makes sense in terms of the transfer money, where the money comes from and where the money goes. But very recently, they are not convinced they can send us back the amount of money we send them because they believe that some of the language is unclear in the statute. To be fair, we don't believe that it's unclear at all. The word notwithstanding does seem to have a meaning to me, but they're uncertain. Because of their uncertainty, we are currently, instead of having premiums deducted from the paycheck, from the retirement check of certain retirees, we're being forced to bill them directly. That is to say, they used to have it come directly out of their check. Now we're sending them a bill, telling them they have to pay it. And if they don't pay it, we, by law, would have to terminate their coverage. And it's currently 600 and some, is that right, Cassie?
Yes.
I think it's 600 and change employees. For them, it's a really big deal. They called House eDNA a bunch of times about this, various and sundry members, and we put this together. The retirement system said they don't care. They just want language that clarifies that they have to make the payment. This paragraph before you was left out of the amendment that made it into House Bill 2. That made it into House Bill 2 in the House phase. And it just clarifies the language and the order of the deductions to make sure that both deductions are meant to be sent. And it makes that happen. In addition to that, not listed here, there is a numerical error. There's a paragraph that in the amendment is labeled 2 and ought to be labeled 3. Your staff is aware of that. And that is a typo, if you will. But I don't list this here, that here. But we think this makes sense. It's the clear legislative intent from time immemorial, and it clarifies things so NHRS doesn't have angst. A whole bunch of retirees don't have an enormous inconvenience, and a staff that has not been built to do billing doesn't have to do billing. It's currently a massive inconvenience for lots of people. Page 19, family and medical leave insurance. There was an FMLI provision in House Bill 1, or House Bill 2 in the House phase. We didn't know it was going to get taken out. We didn't know one way or the other. It ended up being removed from the floor. I have no idea if there will be a move in the Senate to put it back in or leave it out. And I don't care because that's not our job. We don't set policy, we administer policy. However, if you decide this is a policy you want to administer, there is a clarification I would like to make. We would need a person to administer this. This has been our consistent position since there was an analogous bill a year and a half ago in the legislature that didn't end up going anywhere. In addition to that, we would recommend that the timeline be moved 3 months as detailed in the slide. But if it comes back, we would need a position. If it doesn't come back, we wouldn't need that position unless you were wanting to give it to us for some other reason anyway, which seems unlikely to me. Slide number 20. My understanding is that Chuck Sayer from the Governor's Commission on Disability talked to you about this, that there is, we weren't directly involved in this, but there was apparently for about a year, a commission that met about ADA accessibility. And one of their recommendations was that there be a part-time position placed somewhere at the governor's request and Director Sayers' request. We are making this request of you for a part-time position, which would be in DOP, which my understanding, and we would obviously work with that committee, that study committee on this, on ADA accessibility. And my understanding is it relates to things like the cost of accessibility and the accommodations that you would make for an employee who has a need for accommodations. The total general fund cost is listed at the bottom of the slide because it's a part-time position. Anyway, that's all I have. But I'm happy to answer questions. Excuse me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions from the committee? Must have done a good job. I don't see any hands going up.
That are really bad.
Just one.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charlie, how are we doing with that set aside fund for that we charge each renter based on the square footage for repair, replacement, and so forth?
The maintenance fund. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with Senator D'Alessandro, starting 2 years ago in the budget, we have a maintenance fund where we charge 75 cents per square foot for to create a fund to deal with maintenance issues. We deal with pressing maintenance issues by accounting unit, but we fix the roof that needs fixing where there's money, and not the first roof that needs fixing, so to speak. It's not just about roofs, but so we created a maintenance fund to address more pressing needs. What we did with that, frankly, during the pandemic, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you about what happened. Early in the state of emergency, if you will, nobody had any idea what was going on with financing and revenues, and there was an urgent need to stop spending money. Although revenues appear to have recovered quite well. So we didn't spend anything. We didn't spend anything we didn't have to, and this was something we didn't have to. We didn't fix carpeting. We didn't fix stairway treads. We didn't do a lot with the class 48 money in plant and property. And this was an easy way to stop. In addition to that, when the $2 million left over for Concord Steam was the Concord Steam project, a $27 million project. We didn't get extra money for that, but the money lapsed at the end of fiscal 19. That money lapsed. It was meant to be extended and it forgot to be. There was some deal with when they did House Bill 4. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know that both the governor's budget director at the time, the old guy, well, not old, he was the other young guy, and then Representative Wallner from House Finance said, we apologize. You know, they were merging these giant bills together back then. And is there something you can do? Well, the something we could do was spend the money out of the maintenance fund. So until very recently, that money came out of the maintenance fund. We are currently identifying other small projects. Right now, it's very small projects because we want to wait and see what happens in the budget, what happens at class 48, and what happens in the capital budget to try to make sure we fill in. Right, the maintenance fund, if you think about it, is the class 48 money is meant for ongoing, regular, day-to-day maintenance. The capital budget is meant for the big stuff. Right. And the maintenance fund is meant to be sort of somewhere in between, betwixt and between, to identify those projects. So we're working on that. Some of that is happening. We've stood up, or about to stand up, I should say. I think that one of the things we need to have is a sort of an oversight group, a couple of commissioners, a couple of maintenance guys, to look at it and say, what are you doing? Right? Because this is money that's not being spent by accounting units, it's being spent on what we theoretically think the needs are. And it's important to me that it not just be, my decision or my staff's decision, that we have input on that. So that's happening. But to date, most of it was spent on Concord Steam.
Further question, Mr.
Further
Chairman?
question?
Charlie, now what about the second and third floor of the main building at the old New Hampshire Hospital? We talked about that. I went through that with you a couple of years ago. Are we gonna do anything for the people who are there? You got the people who are basically collections people for payments from husbands and so forth that situation is really needs some help. That's a bad environment to be working in.
So there are a lot of, we talk about the physical plant of the state, which is just generally an issue broadly. I mean, you have to identify a difficult spot. I don't know if anybody on your committee has toured the main building, and for God's sakes, don't go in the basement.
Right.
Because it's a little depressing, especially when you ask them, went down the basement there, I'm like, oh, what were these things that look like cells used for? And the guy who knows all the history of the state, he said, I don't think you really want me to answer that. And I'm like, okay, please don't. And he didn't, but I know. A lot of the buildings on that campus are in bad shape, some are in great shape. We tend to, as commissioners and legislators, and this is true of the council and the governor, go to the nicest ones, right? You've probably been to DRA, you've probably been to a meeting in the Walker Building, and we're employment security, the 3 nicest buildings in state government. You probably have not been to very many meetings in Lonergan, and certainly not above the first floor where education is. You probably haven't been to meetings in the main building or the wings of the main building, whether it's Kent or Peasley or the North Wing. What we've looked at, what we've done recently is identify all of the buildings in the state as kind of an A, B, C, or D. To kind of rank them. I didn't think anything should be an F. And we're looking at ways to prioritize how we pay for capital expenses in a way that addresses that. I have some modest hope that some of the federal money might be able to go to fixing some of the state's more decrepit buildings. And if it does, I want to make sure we prioritize the worst buildings. Portions of the main building are dreadful, and portions of it are just not that great. And so I think what we would do is do the portions that are dreadful. Probably there are 2 wings that are called Kent. I think one is Kent and one is Kent Annex or Kent and New Kent. But Kent, the older Kent is probably beyond repair. The Kent Annex is probably not. The Peasley wing, we did structural analysis of, and it doesn't look like you can put things in it because there's cracks in the concrete. The North Wing is in very good shape. I think if we were ever able to afford it, you would want to take the main building, which, for the committee is that the building as you drive in the sort of gate off Pleasant Street, on the hill off to your right is the main building. It's sort of a beautiful panorama, but it's dreadful inside. It's where corrections has some offices too. We'd want to gut and renovate the whole thing. I'm not sure we're ever going to get there. I think we're going to try to do a little bit at a time, but there's not money in the current capital budget. What we're hoping to get some money for in the current capital budget is to, on that campus, in terms of the big stuff, as opposed to like roofs and things like that, and boilers and that kind of thing, is the building whose name, oh my God, every single time I go, Bancroft is its name. So if you look at the main building, there's a little building to its left, which is called the Annex on that campus. And then another building sort of near it, which is a beautiful old Victorian hulk, which we've currently stabilized the roof of. But it's beautiful inside. I mean, creepy, but beautiful if you can look past the paint and rat droppings. And what we're hoping to do is renovate that into better state office space. There's something like 100,000 square feet of state office space, which we're currently renting in Concord as opposed to on campus. And we'd like to slowly but surely move people back. That's too much of an answer, isn't it?
Right. Well, just one further thing, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, Charlie, and Joey Bouchard and Cassie and your staff, really for the phenomenal work that you have done. Cassie on the health insurance for the retirees. I can't thank you enough for protecting the state employees as you have done. And Joe and Charlie, 24/7, the work is just amazing that you guys do. And again, it's really an honor to work with you. And Charlie, you're a bit over, but you do it well. So I have to say thank you very much. And to all of your staff, thank you. I don't think anyone knows the magnitude of the job that you guys are entrusted with doing, and you do it well. And it's really not easy. And I just, the STEAM project got done. Amazing situation, because I was here when 30 years ago, we talked about how that was going to be improved. So thank you for all you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's very nice. Mr. Chairman, I just want to take a second and say it's very nice of Senator D'Alessandro to say that. There are a lot of people in this agency, 444 positions, full and part-time, who do an enormous amount of work every day. It's really easy to be commissioner. Don't tell my wife I said that, because she'll say, then how come you're not getting home earlier? But it's really easy to be commissioner when you have great people behind you. I have 3 wonderful people in the room here with me, 3 of the smarter people in state government, 3 of the smartest people in state government. And I'm surrounded by that every day. And this agency is without question the best, most efficient and hardworking agency in state government. And I would say that to any of my colleagues. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, Commissioner, and wish you and your staff well. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
With that concludes our presentation today. Anything else to be brought forward? Look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Senator Gaida. Is there a second? Second by Senator Hennessy. We'll call roll. Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Reagan. Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator Morse. And the chair votes yes, and we are adjourned. And we'll be back here again tomorrow at 1 o'clock.